there has to be, if we continue down this path, a form of a Nuremberg trials with Trump and his regime officials. You know, the U.S. is not a signatory to the International Court of Justice.
Correct.
But if you commit crimes in countries that are, you can be charged, even though you're not a national of those countries. El Salvador is a signatory to the International Court of Justice.
Oh, interesting.
If Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and Marco Rubio and Thom Hartmann commit crimes against humanity in El Salvador by what they're doing by sending people there who have not been convicted of crimes, knowing that it's a death camp, then arguably they could be charged.
On the line with us, our dear friend and brilliant, one of the nation's most brilliant talk show hosts, Dean on Sirius XM Progress Channel every day, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time every weekday. He also publishes a brilliant newsletter. It's free, and you get it in your email just about every day. It's called the Dean's Report. Just go over to Substack.com and type in Dean's Report, and it'll pop right up. Or the website is Dean Obeidallah, if you can remember how to spell it, OBEIDALLAH.substack.com. Dean Obeidallah, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. That intro was so good, I should just leave now. I think I peaked in the intro. I can only disappoint people from here. Because everything you said was so nice. So I so appreciated being meaty. I sincerely appreciate all the nice words.
I expect my 10%, Dean.
I will be sending it.
But I kid. So Nuremberg trials, your rant this morning was particularly poignant. Tell us about it.
Well, look, I think we touched on it Monday. You were on my show, and that the idea is that when Trump is done, when all of this is over, there has to be, if we continue down this path, a form of a Nuremberg trials with Trump and his regime officials. And to remind everyone, after World War II, there was a Nuremberg trials in Germany of the Nazi officials. And many, not all, were convicted. Some were sentenced to prison, some sentenced to death. But if there's crimes against humanity, and there are by Trump already, with deportations of U.S. citizens, keeping people in a prison in El Salvador, even though the Supreme Court said return him, facilitate return, like last night Donald Trump said to Terry Moran, I could get him back, but I'm not going to. He is willfully and openly defying our court system, and I think this is just the beginning. So this continues on this path, if there's crimes against humanity. I don't know how we actually get to that. You need a conquering power to liberate us, but if we're liberated by us, I hope that we have that kind of people's tribunal when this is over.
You know, when I was on your program on Monday, or your show, I specifically said that I had been rolling around in my head the idea of writing a piece calling for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, in which nobody goes to jail, or maybe just a small handful of people. But people are basically, if they want to be forgiven, they have to confess their sins. I think the important thing here, Dean, whether we do it as Nuremberg trials or whether we do it as a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is that we educate Americans to the fact that they have been lied to by Donald Trump for the better part of 9 years, repeatedly, over and over and over and over again. Many of these lies are extraordinarily destructive, not just to our society, but to our democracy and our government, and that they acknowledge those lies. I mean, so what in your mind is the distinction? I mean, the Holocaust was a hell of an event, right? I mean, they killed something like 10 or 12 million people, 6 million Jews. I mean, I don't think you could not have the Nuremberg trials after the Holocaust. But Trump has not initiated a Holocaust. He's done some really terrible stuff. But, you know, we have not yet even reached the level of Hungary or Russia or arguably even Poland under Duda, you know, in terms of oppression. So at what point is it so bad that you have to do a Nuremberg trial instead of the equivalent of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Or do you see the two things mutually exclusive? Could we do both?
Sure. Let's do both, Tom. Let's have a lot of fun when this is over, all right? So we're going to have the Truth and Reconciliation for the good people. We can reach out to them. I'll say this from a legal point of view, because I was doing some research. You know, the U.S. is not a signatory to the International Court of Justice.
Correct.
But if you commit crimes in countries that are, you can be charged, even though you're not a national of those countries. El Salvador is a signatory to the International Court of Justice.
Oh, interesting.
If Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and Marco Rubio and Thom Hartmann commit crimes against humanity in El Salvador by what they're doing by sending people there who have not been convicted of crimes, knowing that it's a death camp, then arguably they could be charged. Now, they won't be prosecuted until they leave U.S. soil. but there's only a few countries they can go to where they would not be the threat of arrest hanging over them at all times. So look, this is a real thing that I want to see happen. I want to see the ICJ do an investigation. I want to see them charge Donald Trump if the evidence is there, and we're going to see. Look, if the worst of this is today and everything gets better, then maybe not. But every instinct I have tells me we're going to get worse, not better. And Donald Trump last night, Trump at his rally last night, he showed images to the crowd of migrants coming off a plane in El Salvador, being roughed up by the guards, being their head forcibly shaved, being dragged, and the crowd cheered. Okay, the crowd cheered and began chanting USA. That is more bone-chilling than anything Donald Trump says. Yeah. He is priming them. He is getting them ready. The celebration of cruelty is part of who MAGA is. We all know that. That was very jarring what happened last night at that rally. I was just watching clips of it. I couldn't believe that. And again, that could be harkened back to something under Hitler's Germany. Yeah. To be blunt, it's very startling.
The other piece that you wrote at the Dean's Report, we're talking with Dean Obiala, the other piece that you wrote that struck me this week was about Trump's collapsing poll numbers. And what that, triggers for me in my mind is at what point do dictators typically take off the mask? When was it that Putin actually started arresting protesters? At what point did Viktor Orban start arresting people for posting against him on Facebook? And my sense of it is, and I haven't done the research to back this up, but I probably should and write a piece about it myself. But my sense of it is that they are essentially forced to take off the mask and violence against their own people when their popularity starts to slip and they see the very real possibility that they could lose power. What say you?
Tom, you're 100% right based on history. I just interviewed, and he's in Germany, he's a professor. He wrote a book, his name is Marcel Durst, and he wrote a book about how tyrants fall, how nations could be saved. I just interviewed him from Germany yesterday. We're going to play on my show tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. And in the book, he makes the point that it's counterintuitive to some, but even tyrants and dictators want to be popular, or at least appear popular for the psychological advantage of people thinking, well, I can't oppose this person.
They need it. They need that.
Right.
They need that perception of popularity to prevent protest against them.
And that's a big part of it. And what they do in the beginning, Tom, is exactly what Trump is doing now. What they do in the beginning when they start losing a little bit of popularity is targeted repression. That's the term. Targeted, very specific. Like Donald Trump is going after lawyers and law firms and media outlets. You don't do the broad-based oppression until at the end, because you know that's naturally going to cause a massive backlash, especially in a country like this where our DNA is freedom and democracy. So Trump will continue down the path of targeted repression, sign executive orders to go after everyone, newscasters. There's probably going to be no limit to what we're going to see. And I think the media's really failed at covering. We've never had a president target law firms, media outlets, individual lawyers who represent the people Trump doesn't like. We've never seen this, and it's not ending. It's going to only get worse. Even Maggie Haberman, who I really don't like much, but said as much yesterday at CNN. She expects it to get worse going forward. So right now, targeted repression. But that's why Trump's freaking out about the poll numbers. He doesn't want his base to believe those numbers, because if you do, then they might go like, well, if he's really unpopular, what's going on? So he's got to convince them. Even the Fox News poll is BS, and they should be criminally investigated. That's what he called for in writing, and he's trying to suppress them and change their conduct. So you're right on, Tom. Your instincts and based your understanding of history is exactly what Marcel Durst said in his book.
Is there any evidence that the Justice Department actually is investigating any of these polling organizations now in response to Trump's demand?
Well, we know there's lawsuits, right? The lawsuit against the Iowa pollster and the other lawsuits against 60 Minutes. Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, one of the Project 25 architects, is openly investigating PBS, NPR, ABC, CBS. They're trying to prevent the merger, or he's hanging over a merger deal with CBS that they have. With
Sherry Redstone
that they're trying to
flipped out.
Exactly. So
she wants
and that's what the 60 Minutes executive producer talked about in his resignation letter. Yeah. He cited that very merger. So look, what's really going on behind the scenes? We're going to find out more, but we know they've begun the investigation, and we're just 101 days in, Tom. 101 days in, and they've already begun to weaponize the government in ways we have never, ever seen before. Never.
Yeah.
Not even Nixon did this.
No, this is Joe McCarthy's wet dream. I mean, this is McCarthy wanted to turn America fascist, and in fact he had some substantial links to Nazi Germany that Rachel Maddow has documented extensively. Pretty amazing stuff. Dean Obeidallah, you can hear him right here on Sirius XM Progress, channel 127, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and check out his newsletter at Substack.com, The Dean's Report. Dean, thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom. Great seeing you.
Great talking with you. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox, no ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. It was first published in 1993. This is from Chapter 1, titled Detoxing. Today's revolutionary need is to detox ourselves from the old, stereotyped political formulas from 20 or 30 years ago, without which we cannot deal with neocolonialism. A while ago, I was watching a Malcolm X Day program, and the main speaker ended by militantly reciting Malcolm X's famous phrase, "the ballot or the bullet." Haven't you caught the same thing? X, most fresh of all thinkers, is being turned into the equivalent of Lenin or Mao's corpse on ceremonial display. For when X threw down that slogan a generation ago, it was then timely and on point. Black people were struggling for freedom against colonial conditions, and most had neither the ballot nor the bullet. The militant question was which would be picked up. Now the black nation is struggling for its life against neo-colonial conditions, and new African people have lots of ballots and lots of bullets. Everywhere you have African city governments, African officials and African executives, African soldiers, African shooters, and African posses. You might say that the black nation is dying from too much ballots and bullets, but not radical enough truths, perhaps. Under colonialism, the oppressed were largely kept disarmed. Now it's all reversed. Imperialism as a neo-colonial system races not to disarm, which is hopeless in this age, but to arm the oppressed in its own way, whether it's posses or paratroopers, children included, naturally. Feminists say women should get self-defense. Does that threaten imperialism? Then why is Smith & Wesson making the Ladysmith, the .38 subnose specially sized for women? Is the government of white men doing anything to stop women from owning handguns? The ranks of white women who've done so are over 15 million and climbing. Be real. In the Ivory Coast and Somalia, men and boys in rags and bare feet have AK-47s and grenades. In New York and Los Angeles, kids too young for learner's permits got Raven 258 or a Deuce, or maybe even a TAC-9. What's the firepower of the old Black Liberation Army compared to the Crips in Compton or the Jamaica posses just in Flatbush? Get the Uzi is successful slang because it plays off reality we all know. More than a few new African children say personally they got to be more afraid of black people than white people. So how useful is the liberal left habit of playing low to the crowd with old anti-colonial rhetoric? It used to be that dissing the white man was a crime or close to it, dangerous for sure, like life-threatening if a black man or woman did it. Now it's so tame that Fox or ABC give it to us as a sitcom. There's even some college courses on how to diss the white man. He may not like it, but who cares? Imperialism doesn't care, that's for sure. Even white women are doing it now as a substitute for doing anything real. It's like running in place. As Rodney, the Guyanese revolutionary scholar, pointed out, it's counterproductive to solve the neo-colonial situation, or counterproductive to solving the neo-colonial situation. Revs still cling to the old ideas and ways, in part because we don't want to admit how ignorant we are now. This runs deeper, though. Anti-colonial politics are the culmination of 400 years of our struggle. They are the products of the best minds we had, of destroying old societies, of oppressed people challenging the world in uprisings, pushing farther and farther. These old views are already fully developed, well-honed. More than that, the old anti-colonial politics are developed in the most profound sense, in having been widely diffused and taken hold of by the oppressed, put to use already. So when Revs talk about that old talk, walk that old walk, it's not only familiar, but reassuring and to a certain degree popular. We all take for granted now that the anti-colonial consciousness and changes. It's become the normal. That's what's our due. A few years ago, Nelson Mandela was the most famous terrorist POW in the world. In 1990, when he made his triumphant visit here, he was not only greeted by massive crowds of well-wishers, but schools and churches throughout the black nation held special programs to honor him. City governments and the U.S. Congress itself had to organize welcomes for him. Like it or not, white men had to smile and applaud him. And last year, by any means necessary T-shirts with Malcolm's picture on them were more common in many streets than Budweiser T-shirts. And you can't take it to mean anything extreme or radical. The old anti-colonial awareness has already been generalized widely, absorbed by people and society itself into daily life. So let's break that down. When a tiny Klan faction based in North Carolina to the U.S. Capitol from a rally on Labor Day weekend 1990, it took over 2,000 cops in riot gear to hold the angry crowds back. The D.C. New African community was outraged that any Klan dared to march in their city, which is 70% black, on their territory. Ephi Berry, the then wife of the then mayor, Marion Berry, came out and brought her 10-year-old son. "I'm overwhelmed," she said. The book is Night Vision, Illuminating War and Class of the Neocolonial Terrain by Butch Lee and Red Rover, first published in 1993.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Thursday. A lot going on in the world today. Medical bills, student loans, broken lives. Is it time to talk about reparations from the banking and health insurance industry for basically the last 2 generations? We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, Trump has launched his own new propaganda site paid for by you and me. Dictator propaganda typically involves a combination of censorship, the creation of a cult of personality, and the dissemination of misleading or biased information. Yeah, it kind of checks all those boxes. His new order also sparks martial law concern, Newsweek writing about that, and a Furry Alert. The Republican who authored the anti-furry bill down in Texas has no evidence that schools gave litter boxes to kids who identified as cats. In fact, they had no evidence of any kids identifying as cats, period. Are you surprised? In the second hour of our program, our single guest for the day, Phil Ittner, is going to drop by with a report live from Ukraine. Also, is Trump, and we'll talk about, Trump's new minerals deal with them. Is Trump a pathological liar, or is he believing those who lie to him? we really needed to talk this through, right? We'll get into this in the second hour. Donald Trump insisting that Kilmar Garcia has MS-13 tattoos on his hands when everybody knows it's a lie. It was a photoshopped picture. What's going on with that? And Bernie is trolling Trump. My size is bigger than your size. And guess what? It was. I'll tell you about that in the second hour. In the third hour, a new mideast project is Trump's latest deal, his latest grift tied to a foreign government. Jimmy Carter had to put his peanut farm in a blind trust that almost wiped it out. Trump, on the other hand, is growing his business. This is such a clear violation of the Emoluments Clause. Mind-boggling. Also, Trump is selling pardons again. More proof that the rich get away with everything and the poor go to prison. I'll tell you about that in the third hour of the program. So, a lot to cover, but the first hour starts out with the my newsletter today, Hartmann Report, and the headline is my daily take. The headline is Medical Bills, Student Loans, Broken Lives, Reparations for a Rigged Economy. Linda McMahon, she's worth $3.5 billion. She and her husband run this kind of worldwide wrestling thing. So wrestling, but she's also our Secretary of Education now. And she penned an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal a week or so ago saying, and I quote, on May 5th, we'll begin the process of moving roughly 1.8 million borrowers into repayment plans and restart collections of loans in default. Borrowers who don't make payments on time will see their credit scores go down, and in some cases, their wages automatically garnished. So if you have student loans that you haven't been able to keep up with, haven't been able to pay, Trump is coming after you. Which raises a really vital question. Is it time to lay down a claim for reparations for student loan borrowers and health insurance payers? I mean, just consider this for a moment. As you're hearing reparations and going, what? What the hell? What's he talking about? Hey? Well, here's the deal. We are the only developed country in the world where our citizens are carrying almost $2 trillion in student loan debt. We are the only developed country in the world where our citizens are carrying over $1 trillion in medical debt. It literally does not happen in any other advanced democracy. And I'm talking about, from the big countries of Europe to Costa Rica. I've told this story many times. Louise and I, we had a family vacation in this little property that my sister-in-law rented down in Costa Rica. And as you know, we flew in and we picked up a cab at the airport, and he drove us out to this place. It was about an hour drive. And on the way, this cab driver is telling me how his son just graduated from medical school and he's going to be a physician. Now, he's not going to get rich being a physician because there's lots of doctors in Costa Rica, because anybody can go to medical school. And healthcare is free. I mean, you look at this, that's Costa Rica. It's also Finland and Denmark and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and Germany and France and England. You could just go, Switzerland. Switzerland is probably the exception. They have an entirely private healthcare system, but it's all nonprofit corporations, and they all operate under strict government supervision, so it might as well be government run. So here we are. We hit our young people with student debt, and throughout the course of their lives, we hit our people with medical, and it actually hurts our democracy. When we did the GI Bill in the 1940s and 50s, and I believe it ended in 64. When we did the GI Bill, one of the things we learned in the 70s when we went and looked back at the consequences of the GI Bill was that for every $1 we spent on educating one of these young people coming back from World War II, most of them young men, but women as well, for every dollar we spent on educating these young people coming home from World War II, we made $7 in income tax revenue over the lifetime of those people that we never would have earned. I give the example of my wife's father. Bob was, he came from a very poor family. Literally, like dirt poor. His mother died when he was very young. His father raised him. I'm not even sure that they had hot water all the time. And he came back from World War II and got his law degree with the GI Bill. Didn't pay a penny for it. In fact, the GI Bill gave my dad and Louise's dad a stipend to go to college. My dad only went for 2 years because Mom got pregnant with me. Louise's dad finished. And he became the Assistant Attorney General for the state of Michigan. And, he made a lot more money than he would have made, as a AG and as a lawyer, than he would have made if he had worked in a factory. So number one, we know that paying for, free college actually has a 700% return to the country. If you're just looking at the economics of it. That's not to mention, suddenly you have an educated populace that's like developing the transistor and Velcro and, Tang and stuff, all kinds of stuff going on. And then with regard to health care, think how, people who are hit with health care bills and it just wipes them out. This leads to what? Loss of their homes. It leads to divorces. It prevents them from starting businesses. I mean, it's just a huge burden on our society. These two things, this student debt and medical debt, should not exist. And prior to the Reagan Revolution, they did not exist in the United States. When I went to college in the mid-1960s, I paid my way working as, pumping gas at the Esso station and washing dishes at Bob's Big Boy and playing DJ on the weekends at WITL. And you could pay for college. I not just paid for college, I paid for my room and board as well. I was living in an apartment across the street from MSU. You could do that on a part-time weekend job. You could go to college. You can't do that anymore. And in 72, I think it was, we started, Terry O'Connor and I started this business, the Woodley Herber Company, an herbal tea company out of, Okemos, Michigan. And, at its peak, we had 18 employees. We gave them all free health insurance. Why? Because it was cheap. Michigan law at that time required every hospital in the state to be a nonprofit and required all the health insurance companies to be nonprofits. And so it was inexpensive. Well, then came along Reagan, and all that went to hell. And now, health insurance costs a fortune. Getting sick costs a fortune. Hospitals are gouging people left and right and increasingly are being owned by private equity or hedge funds. And the banks, George W. Bush in 2005 pushed through this legislation that made it illegal to discharge student loan debts by bankruptcy. So if you're a student, if you got student loan debts, you can't even declare bankruptcy, at least on those debts. I mean, this is just wrong. So I think that we need to be talking about reparations, and I'm serious. How do we do this? Should the insurance and banking industries give everybody in America some stock in their companies? Should their overpaid executives surrender some of the billions in dollars that they've essentially stolen from us? Should we break up these behemoths, sell them off, and use the proceeds to make America whole? Do we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to facilitate this and get confessions from these industries whose practices have led to the deaths of many Americans and the ruination of many others? I mean, there's got to be a way to balance the scales of justice here, right? Remember when drugs were affordable before the Reagan Revolution? Remember when, before the Reagan Revolution, when houses cost basically twice an annual salary? Now they cost 10 times an annual salary. Remember when credit cards were capped at 10% before Nixon and the Supreme Court went to that? We need to fix this stuff.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Americans have been bled dry way too long. It's time to rip these parasites off our backs and rejoin the civilized world. And welcome back, Denise in Folsom, California. Hey, Denise, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Good morning, Tom. It's a beautiful day today on May 1st here in Folsom, California.
It is here in Portland.
My question to you is, I have my American flag out, and I have it out all the time. And one of my girlfriends the other day said, I want to put mine out too, but I don't want people to think that I'm a Republican and I'm, this and that. And I said, well, I do it because I'm an American. And we've been talking about this around the neighborhood. How do we get the true meaning of the American flag plus the true meaning of the Holy Cross back in our society. I feel like the Republicans have stolen those two true meanings from us.
Christianity.
Why aren't the Democrats? I suggest the Democrats need to emphasize on that, the true meaning of what the American flag stands for. Everyone should have it in their front yard right now to represent the United States of America. And I think that when I see people with them wearing a cross, the first thing I think about is the press secretary and the lies that she keeps telling. So how do we get that?
And our attorney general as well.
Yeah, how do we get that back to the American people?
Well, one thought would be, Denise, to find a Democrat who's running for something. I mean, every year there's some election somewhere. Yeah, I mean, it could be drain commissioner or county clerk. But find a Democrat who's running for something and get a lawn sign from them and stick it in your front lawn along with your flag. And that way you're saying Democrat and here's the flag. What do you think?
Yeah, I do believe in that very much, but I'm afraid that, a lot of people are scared right now.
Yeah, I get it.
And everyone that I know that has an American flag out, because I know my neighbors pretty well around here in the Folsom area, I know who they are, and I'm doing this because I want to represent the United States. I am not scared to be an American. But what I'm really sad about is that what are we teaching our children that with the American flag? I mean, it's really sad. And this cross, I'm Catholic. I was raised, you never mix politics and religion together. And if you're going to do that, you better have the true definition on both of those and stop. I mean, it's just really sad where we are, and it really disturbs me. I have pulled away from so many people who are Christians right now because I look at them differently, and I never wanted to get to that point in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I
so
totally
what do you suggest as Americans or any of your viewers, what do you suggest that we do? Why do we not, when we're doing these marches, have that flag in our hand?
Well, we've had actually a number of people call into the program since the protests really started aggressively a couple of weeks ago, saying that they were taking flags, American flags, to the protests. And I strongly encourage people to do so. I mean, today is protest day, right? And find where your protest is happening in Folsom, California, and take a flag with you. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Those pictures get circulated far and wide.
I go to all of the, I went to the Bernie Sanders, I went to the Eric Salwa, and I enjoyed it so much, but no one talked about the American flag or the Holy Cross. Yeah. And that's something I think, if we're going to mix politics and religion together, we better get the facts straight and the true meaning of both of them and not have them something. Exactly. And I'm hoping that someone of your views can help me through this.
Yeah. I get it, Denise. I don't have a glib answer for you. I'm sorry, but we all need to work on it. I agree with your analysis. Thank you. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%. And how, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government, all kinds of good, positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, but what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com.
They told us to work, to dream, to strive, but stole the future while we were alive. We borrowed hope just to get through school. Now we drown in debt, they call that the rule. They took our health and sold it for gold, turned healing and learning into things bought and sold. Now we break beneath what we can't afford, while billionaires laugh behind every door. It's time to rise, time to see reparations for a rigged economy. They looted the people, gave it to the few. Now justice comes and the bill is due. We won't go silent, we won't be shamed. This stolen life will be reclaimed. My mother worked nights, my father 2 jobs, still lost their home to the banking mob. I studied hard, did what they said. Now I sign away half my life to stay fed. They shattered the unions, broke every rule, turned truth into lies and kindness to cruel. They built a machine on our sweat and tears and told us we'd prosper in 20 more years. But we remember when schools were free and healing was near, when housing was fair and wages were clear. We remember and we demand to take back this stolen land.
23 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. The quote for the day comes from Jeff Tiedrich from his newsletter, his Substack newsletter. Folks, I know you're not going to believe this, but the lifelong failure who failed at running a real estate empire, failed at running casinos, failed at running an airline, failed at running a football team, failed at fighting a pandemic, failed at selling steaks, failed at selling water, failed as a father, failed as a husband, failed to preserve the strong economy that he inherited from Joe Biden. Yeah. And to cover up these failures, the White House has just launched its own version of the Drudge Report. It's paid for with your tax dollars and mine. It's called the White House Wire. It has, links to Breitbart and Fox and Daily Caller and New York Post, Washington Times, all that kind of junk. And Matt Drudge is not happy about this. Matt is no fan of Donald Trump, as you may have figured out. And so he's got a headline. It takes an entire West Wing to compete with Drudge. Developing, Trump launches his own Drudge Report using taxpayer dollars. And then Drudge Report founder Matt Drudge told Oliver Darcy over at Status News, I'm considering a $1 trillion lawsuit. Some of the headlines on Trump's new Drudge Report. Walmart expands support for American-made products. AstraZeneca ships more production to the U.S. amid Trump tariffs. $35 trillion in new investment fuels American future. $5 trillion, excuse me. And it goes on from there. Yeah, right. Using our tax dollars to promote propaganda. Just amazing. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's latest executive order unleashes the cops and flirts with martial law. He says that, first of all, the cops are protected by well-powered, powerful unions. They're protected by a judicial doctrine of qualified immunity. They're protected by the prosecutors and district attorneys. And now Trump is saying in his executive order that they're going to be protected by the nation's biggest law firms. And he wants them to get more military equipment. What could possibly go wrong? And finally, the Republican lawmaker down in Texas, who is Stan Gerdes, who is pushing legislation to outlaw litter boxes in schools, was confronted by a Democrat who said, can you name a school where it's been confirmed that students are using litter boxes? He says, this bill is to prevent that from happening. Can you name a school where it's been confirmed the students are using litter boxes? Gerdes says, no, I can't. And then he says, the Democrat says, are you aware that Governor Abbott said, quote, kids go to school dressed up as cats with litter boxes in their classrooms? And Gerdes says, sure. And Tallarico says, are you also aware that when the governor was asked by the Dallas Morning News to name a single school where that happened, he couldn't? Do you really think it's a good use of our time to write laws based on debunked internet conspiracy theories? Well, this Republican is saying, yeah, we're going to push this legislation through the Texas legislature. We've got a furry crisis here. We've got a problem. Young people going to school and using litter boxes in the corner, it's just wrong. It's not sanitary. This is almost as crazy as Trump saying that our cops need more military equipment. It's just nuts. So what's on your mind? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Speaking the truths Trump will never put on his new version of the Drudge Report. I'll be right back with you. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Lords of Easy Money, How the Federal Reserve Broke the American Economy by Christopher Leonard. Now, this is from Chapter 1. It's titled Going Below Zero, and it begins our story in 2010. Thomas Hoenig, H-O-E-N-I-G, woke up early on November 3rd, 2010, knowing what he had to do that day and also knowing that he was almost certainly going to fail. He was going to cast a vote, and he was going to vote no. He was going to dissent, and he knew that this dissent would probably define his legacy. Hoenig was trying to stop something, a public policy that he believed could very well turn into a catastrophe. He believed it was his duty to do so, but the wheels were already turning to make this policy a reality, and the wheels were far more powerful than he was. The wheels were powered by the big banks on Wall Street, the stock market, and the leadership of America's Federal Reserve Bank. Everyone knew that Hoenig was going to lose that day, but he was going to vote no anyway. Hoenig was 64 years old, and he was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, a position that gave him extraordinary power over America's economic affairs. He was in Washington that morning because he sat on the Federal Reserve's powerful policymaking committee, which met every 6 weeks to effectively determine the value and quantity of American money. Most people in America don't think very much about money, meaning the actual currency, that thing we call the dollar. The word dollar is, in fact, a slang term for American currency, which is actually called a Federal Reserve note. People spend Federal Reserve notes every day if they're lucky enough to have them, but they rarely think about the complex, largely invisible system that makes money appear out of thin air. This system is the U.S. Federal Reserve System. The Fed, America's central bank, is the only institution on earth that can create U.S. dollars at will. Because he was a senior official at the Federal Reserve, Thomas Hoenig had to think about money all the time. He thought about it in the same way that a very stressed-out building superintendent might think about plumbing and heating. Hoenig had to think about money as a system to be managed, and to be managed just right. When you ran the system that created money, you had to do your job carefully, with prudence and integrity, or else terrible things might happen. The building might flood or catch fire. This is why Hoenig felt so much pressure when he woke up that November morning in Washington, D.C. He was staying at a very nice hotel called the Fairmont, where he always stayed when he traveled from his home in Kansas City to the nation's capital. Hoenig was in town for the regular meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC for short. When the committee met in Washington, its members voted and set the course of the Fed's actions. There were 12 members on the committee, which was run by the powerful chairman of the Federal Reserve. For a year now, Hoenig had been voting no. If he tallied his votes during 2010, they would read no, 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 and no. His dissents had become expected, but they were also startling if you consider Thom Hoenig's character. He wasn't by nature anything close to a dissident. He was a rule follower. He was born and raised in a small town where he started working at the family plumbing shop before he was 10 years old. He served as an artilleryman in Vietnam, and when he came home, he didn't protest against the war. Instead, he studied economics and banking at Iowa State, earning a PhD. His first job out of school was as an economist with the Federal Reserve Regional Bank in Kansas City in the supervision department. At the Fed, he went from being a rule follower to being a rule enforcer. Hoenig rose through the ranks to become president of the Kansas City Fed in 1991. This was the job he still held in 2010. His responsibilities as one of 12 regional Fed Bank presidents illuminate the structure of America's money system. The Federal Reserve is like any other in the world. It is a crazy genetic mashup of different animals, part private bank and part government agency. People talk about the Fed as if it were a bank, but it is really a network of regional banks, all controlled by a central office in Washington, D.C. Hoenig had all the fiery disposition that one might expect from a regional Fed president, which is to say none at all. He was soft-spoken, civil, wore cufflinks and pinstripe suits, and spent his days talking about things like capital requirements and interest rates. Honig was an institutionalist and a conservative with the little c sense of the word. And yet here he was, in late 2010, a dissident. After he woke up in his hotel room, Honig had some time alone before the big day started. He gathered his thoughts. He shaved, put on a suit, knotted his tie, and gathered his papers. If he had any doubts about what he was going to do that day, he didn't advertise them. He had spent months, years, even decades preparing for this action. This vote would reflect everything he'd learned during his career at the Fed. He was trying to apply what he knew to help the Federal Reserve navigate through extraordinary times. The American financial system had broken in late 2008 after the investment bank Lehman Brothers collapsed. That moment marked a threshold for people like Thom Hartmann. Economists and central bankers described the ensuing panic as the global financial crisis, eventually bestowing the moment with its own biblical label, the GFC. The world of central banking was neatly divided into two eras. There was the world pre-GFC and the world post-GFC. The GFC itself was apocalyptic. The entire financial system experienced a total collapse that risked creating another Great Depression. The book, The Lords of Easy Money by Christopher Leonard, the subtitle, How the Federal Reserve Broke the American Economy. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Don't say the GOP ain't working hard. They've got their eyes on your schoolyard. Forget about wages or Medicare. There's a kid in a tail, and that just ain't fair. While billionaires are skipping tax and bridges crumble, roads collapse, Gird stands proud and bold to fight the menace 12 years old. The furry crisis, sound the alarm. A kid just barked, bring in the National Guard. I fix the grid or raise the wage when a child mowed out on a classroom stage. This is war, this is real. Texas jail, truth, justice, and the American way. No fur allowed in the Lone Star State.
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Wow. Adam in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Adam, what's on your mind today?
Hey, guten Tag, Tom. Hey, how does Donald Trump change a light bulb?
I don't know.
He doesn't. He just claims he did. The media reports it, and everybody applauds in the dark.
There you go. Brilliant.
Hey, so I wanted to call about, you had, I think, a law enforcement officer on yesterday, and I was wondering if you could get a constitutional scholar or somebody who's really knowledgeable about the law, because I have a question on some scenarios. The first is when ICE operates in a state like Massachusetts or, Texas, it's my understanding that they still have to abide by the local state laws. And if they're going around without badges and warrants and arresting people unlawfully, that's a violation of the state law, from my understanding. Wouldn't that set up a scenario where you could technically have local law enforcement arrest ICE agents for kidnapping?
Adam, I am not qualified to answer that question. It's an intriguing possibility. The guy you should ask that of, and I encourage you to call in when he's on, is Ro Khanna. Ro Khanna has a law degree from Yale, as I recall, and he studied constitutional law. It was one of the things he's very knowledgeable on. So, next time he's on,
I think
Sean, do you know when Ro Khanna is going to be on next? We don't. We're not sure. A lot depends these days on the schedule in Congress. But anyhow, back to you.
Well, that could set up a conflict like we had in Arkansas in like the 1950s, where I think the governor didn't want black kids to attend schools, even though what the Supreme Court ruled that was unconstitutional.
Right.
And then I think Eisenhower had to send federal troops.
Yeah, he sent the National Guard in, actually.
Yeah, so there was a conflict there between local law enforcement and, well, in that case, it was the National Guard.
The federal troops. I mean, actually, yeah, Eisenhower declared a state of emergency to justify the National Guard, and he did it. But again, in answer to your question, I don't know the answer, but I would love to hear it. And Sean just told me that Congressman Khanna will be on the program on Monday. So give us a shout then, okay? Thanks a lot, Adam.
All right.
Good talking to you. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Always a pleasure.
I listened to you about the reparations, about the college situation. It would go back to racism. It would go back to all these black people. All they do is want free stuff.
Well, that's a large reason. That's the 90%, Tyrone, of the reason why we don't have a national health care system and why there's a 20% hole in Medicare. Those things both came out of the white supremacists in Congress, largely Republicans, although prior to the 60s it was Democrats, not wanting black people to have access to those things. I can't point to a specific thing with regard to college, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was a racial element in that too.
Absolutely, and because it's such a low-hanging fruit, because so many people have an adverse effect to dealing with people of color in this country, and this is something that was bred into the bloodstream of America. That we were taught to believe that white people are naturally good and black people are naturally bad. So if a white person do something bad, that's a good person doing something bad. But if a black person do something bad, he's just a bad person in general. Right. So that is something that has been inbred in the psyche of a lot of Americans in this country. But I'm concerned about this executive order that President Trump just signed pertaining to this whole giving military access to being able to deal with lawbreakers in the United States, American citizens. Right. Now, lawbreaker could be anything Trump can deem a lawbreaker. We right now at war against immigrants because they are breaking the law, and they are, you use this anti-law against the immigrants. My concern also is that this man is insulating himself and making himself impervious to us actually having some kind of say, because he got the DOJ, he got the FBI, he got the military, he got these people that are a yes men to him, not to the Constitution. Forget the Constitution, right, to get the laws in this country. But because he have these people loyal to him, how is it? Not unless we do, like I keep going back to South Korea, not unless we do a complete uprising against the systems that are set up to help protect him against what's right and what's wrong. Yeah,
so, I agree. And it'll be interesting. I'm hoping people will call in from their protests all over the country today into the program. I'd love to hear how these things are going. Tyrone, speaking about the reasons why we have basically no national health care system in the United States, why we have over $1 trillion in medical debt, why we have almost $2 trillion in student debt, having to do with race and racism. Another thing that really hit me yesterday, of course, Elon Musk grew up in apartheid South Africa. According to his father, he was driven to school every morning from his white neighborhood to his all-white school in a Rolls Royce by a chauffeur. And his family left when apartheid ended. They didn't want to live in a mixed-race society. And yesterday on NPR, I was listening. I was driving and I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about how black people are suffering most as a consequence of these government employee layoffs, that starting in the 60s in a big way, the federal government jobs were the cream of the crop for black people who, basically had a high school education. But we're smart and could do a good job. And that more than a third of all federal employees are black, whereas only 16 or 17% of our population is black. And so if Elon Musk wanted to just kneecap hundreds of thousands of black people, all he had to do was just lay off hundreds of thousands of federal workers, which is exactly what he's doing.
Absolutely. They say if you keep saying that everything is racism, it dilutes the effect of racism. No. If you ignore the fact that this stuff is happening because of racism, that's what's going to leave us more vulnerable to racist actions against people of color.
Yeah.
And because they use that as a way to back us down, they say, "Oh no, everything is not racist." So when you look into what the reason of why these people are doing the things that they do, it goes right back to that.
Yeah.
And they use it as a cudgel against the American people.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
Trump does his Russia thing to diminish the fact that he became president because of Vladimir Putin's efforts. He does his racist thing to make fun of people calling him a racist. But I'll call him a racist, and Elon Musk too. Tyrone, thank you for the call. Max in Rosenheim, Germany. Hey, Max, what's on your mind today?
How you doing? I just wanted to point out something to you about the GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are born in the same year, and I profited from the GI Bill. So I think what you meant was the World War II GI Bill ended around 1964.
That's right. Yeah, there was a second GI Bill. You're right. After
right.
Was that after the Gulf War?
No, I was in during Vietnam.
Oh, and it came after Vietnam. Okay, cool.
No, it didn't come after Vietnam. It was there.
Uh-huh.
And what happened was when I would talk to the World War II veterans, they would say to us, then young people, "Wow, your GI Bill sucks." And they would use that word exactly.
Yeah, it was nowhere near as generous as the one that my dad and your dad apparently had, Max.
And so when I got out of the military, I went to school for 6 years, got a couple of university degrees, and I counted it up one time. I figured it out. It took me 2 years of paying taxes, and I had completely paid back all the GI Bill money that I had received.
Uh-huh.
It is a good deal.
Yeah, it's a great investment.
And now that I'm a, let's say, mature individual like you, I tell my niece who was in the Iraq War, and she says, "Yeah, the GI Bill, I got this," and I'm sounding like my old World War II compatriots who say, "Wow, you're getting ripped off."
Yeah.
Actually, it was a really good deal. And for all the Republican lovers of the 1950s, there's your result, the GI Bill.
There you go. And a third of America having unions and brand new schools and hospitals, and all the hospitals had to be nonprofit, and the health insurance industry is nonprofit, and the drug industry had not consolidated because Reagan hadn't stopped enforcing the Sherman Act until 1983. Spot on. Max, thank you very much. It's 45, and thanks for listening to us in Germany. 45 minutes past.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
46 past the hour now. It's the Thom Hartmann program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back, Chris in the Catskills of New York. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. How are you?
Fine, thank you. What's up?
I've been going to all the anti-Trump rallies locally. There's a lot of them in my part of New York State, and I'm involved in local politics, and I'm seeing kind of a repeat of what a lot of the protests have been about since Trump has come onto the political scene. And I think the Democratic Party, if we're serious about wanting to strategically take back both houses in Congress in a year and a half, and obviously the White House in 2028, I want to see more specificity in like a policy wonk type of presentation of ideas of improvements of what we're going to make in federal government. And, your discussions today have included topics like that, like, putting a cap at interest rates on credit cards and making improvements in the healthcare systems, like to describe strategies to improve upon the quality of service in rural areas of healthcare in this country, and et cetera.
So what's your point, Chris?
Trump is doing wrong. I don't necessarily think I hear that when I have discussions with people that are at these rallies. I think there's a difference of opinion as to what the strategy of messaging and what it should be. And I don't think we're there yet as a party, unfortunately.
No, I agree. And part of the problem is that we have this Clinton legacy of corporate Democrats, the Jared Goldens and Josh Gottheimers of the world, who are basically, they have their hand out. Whoever gives them campaign contributions, they're there for. And it's a problem. It's about half the party right now. The other half of the party, I think, is doing really, really well. And we've got some real leaders right now. We're seeing, people like Eric Swalwell, Bernie Sanders, AOC. It's just a bunch of people who are standing up and speaking out. J.B. Pritzker the other day, I was just blown away by. Sean's trying to get him on the program here. Yeah, so, step by step. We'll get there, Chris. Chris, thanks for the call. David in San Pedro, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, it's been a while. I have a couple of healthcare insurance horror stories for you.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Well, I've had some problem with my arteries. My aorta has been complete. And my cardiologist demands once a year that I go get a CRT scan of my, chest and abdomen, so we make sure that everything's still plugged up all right and operating correctly. And I've done this for several years in a row. But last October, I went into the same hospital I always go to, and went in, got the scan and all that good stuff. Never talked to a doctor. It was just the scan, right? And then, expected insurance to take care of it because they've always done that. And I've had 3 or 4, years of scans already. Anyway, come a month later, I get a bill for $22,000 for a single scan.
Are you on Medicare or on regular insurance?
Both.
So you're on Medicare Advantage?
Actually, I have a policy from work also, but Medicare didn't cover it, and I eventually worked it out, and it came to a $275 copay, but it took...
That's better. That's better. David, I'm out of time. I'm sorry, I got to run, but thank you for this story. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So back in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt became president, we were in the depths of the Great Depression. He raised the top income tax rate on billionaires from 25% to 90%. The ultra-rich were screaming, and here's what he had to say.
A number of my friends who belong in the very high upper bracket have suggested to me on several occasions of late that if I am reelected president, they will have to move to some other nation because of high taxes here. Now, I will miss them very much.
He just took it right to them, right? Now, what came out of that was the world's largest and fastest growing and first major middle class. We can do this again. We just have to raise taxes on rich people. It's pretty straightforward. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
It starts starts with a whisper, it starts with a call. One voice rising can speak for us all. When we stand together, there's nothing we can't do. The strength of a union begins with you. From the factory floors to the office walls, we've got the power to change it all. A fair day's wage and a voice in the fight. Together we shine, standing up for what's right. Unions begin with you, with me, with us. Together we rise, in each other we trust. When we speak as one, we break through the chains. We fight for the future, we weather the rains. Unions begin with you, it's true. When we come together, there's nothing we can't do.
Patrick in Joliet, Illinois. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind?
Tom, this is Pat Riley, and I'm at the Union Park in Chicago. They're singing a song right now, and it's a great festival of resistance and positive change. And my sign says, restore the rule of law for our grandchildren.
Oh, marvelous,
And another sign says, hearts, justice, mercy, hearts open and hands off. Another one says, I'm not terrified. I'm not terrified. So it's a grand celebration. I just called in because you had said yesterday, call in where you go to the group for May Day, and I wanted to well, you can hear the cheering. So it's right by the Lake Street L here at Union Park. And,
That's great.
Long-time listener. Thanks for all that you do. Really appreciate
Patrick,
it.
I'm curious, were you at the same park for the last big protest a couple of weeks ago? And if so, is the crowd now larger or smaller?
I'm sorry, I wasn't, Tom. I really wasn't, but it's well, you can hear the crowd. It's great, you know, and no problem getting here. It's all peaceful and where we're going to take the country. That's for sure.
There you go, Patrick. Thanks for the report. Thanks for the report from Chicago.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, good talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Thank you. Hills in Santa Barbara, California. Hey, Hills, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. Thank you, Tom. To sort of piggyback onto a caller previously, the retaking of our symbols from the people who are misusing them, like, for instance, Pete Hegseth, you know, with his immature handkerchief thing, man, I hope he doesn't use that.
Which is a violation of the flag code, by the way. You're not supposed to make flags into clothing.
Or blow your nose on it. But,
yeah.
A lot of use of language is sloppy, and maybe it's the decline in people actually reading books. But I think that everybody referring to us as Americans is sloppy because we're United States citizens. Because, you know, Mexicans are Americans, Chileans are Americans, Canadians are Americans, and that's a really not respectful of all of America, all of Americans. We are United States.
I get it. Hills, we're also the United States of America. So, you know, generally speaking, the world abbreviates that as Americans. I get your objection. I've heard it 1,000 times. It's not going to change anybody's mind, but, you know, good point. Thank you for the call. Rich in Lake Ariel, Pennsylvania. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Someone earlier on called the show, and thanks for taking the call, Tom,
sure.
And was questioning whether the state authorities could arrest ICE for what they're doing, and whether that, you know, if it was barred by state law. And I'm just wondering what's the difference. It's barred by federal law what they're doing. The law doesn't seem to matter. And I practiced constitutional law when I started as Assistant Attorney General in New York State.
Yeah. What federal law are they violating, Rich?
Well, they're violating due process of law.
Oh, I see.
They're violating the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the 4th through the 8th, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole.
So there's no question that the removal of people, particularly most recently the person who says, yeah, I could get them back, but won't.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling to me. The rule of law goes by the wayside, and how the Supreme Court hears that and doesn't hold big.
Forgive the interruption, but I've got a hard break coming in about 20 seconds. Do state officials have the authority to arrest federal officials?
Generally speaking, no. Generally speaking, the federal, you know, if it's a power that hasn't been delegated
But if a federal official was to commit murder, and there's state laws against murder and there are no federal laws against it, you would think that the state officials could arrest the federal officials. I mean, there has to be...
without question.
So there has to be, if federal officials are breaking state laws, they have to be arrestable, don't they?
All right, well, laws that are not given to the feds reside with the state.
Yeah, it's the 10th Amendment. Yeah, I get it. Rich, thank you. Thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from an attorney. I truly appreciate it. Thank you. All right, on the other side of the break, Phil Ittner is going to be with us. We'll get a live update from Ukraine. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Decadent Society, How We Became the Victims of Our Own Success by Russ Douthat, a New York Times columnist. And this is from, it's about the middle of his first chapter. This is a subchapter titled The Limits of Neoliberalism. There's no shortage of theories to explain this great stagnation, to borrow a phrase from one of the theorizers, the George Mason University economist Tyler Cowen. And there's also no need to simply choose between them. Like most broad trends, the economic decadence of the developed world is overdetermined, and almost every serious attempt at explanation will contain some element of truth. The most politically appealing theories, the ones animating our populist and socialist insurgencies, tend to blame neoliberalism itself, claiming that the medicine for 1970s stagflation has proven to be poisonous in large doses. The push for ever freer trade has hollowed out Western economies, the argument goes, offshoring productive industries and killing decent jobs, making financiers and knowledge workers rich while the middle class shrinks steadily. Meanwhile, low tax rates intended to spur investment have enabled the rich to keep more of their gains while starving the programs required to protect the poor and boost the working classes. Antitrust policy has become so fixated on the so-called benefits of consolidation, lower prices for consumers, that it has ignored all the ways that market-dominant corporations can warp policies and strangle innovation. And anti-inflationary policies, forged to counteract a crisis that's now generations behind us, have been adopted as a dogma that's now by the West's financial and political elite, which demands fiscal austerity under every circumstance and deprives struggling economies of the cash they need to grow. You don't have to accept every aspect of this argument, and indeed the populists of the left and right disagree about which aspects to stress, to see that it describes a real phenomenon, perhaps not the outright failure of neoliberalism, but diminishing returns from some of its preferred policies, and an overconfidence among the Western leadership class that solutions from the 1970s are permanently applicable. On trade, for instance, the general principle that open markets have more winners than losers led policymakers to assume that this would necessarily happen and to overestimate how quickly communities affected by outsourcing would recover and how swiftly other sectors of the economy could compensate. In particular, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology economist David Ittner has argued persuasively that the China shock, the dramatic offshoring that followed Beijing's entrance into the World Trade Organization in 2001, inflicted more economic damage on working-class communities in the United States than many experts anticipated, without generating the compensating growth and job creation expected elsewhere. This is not a knockdown case against free trade, just a case against overconfidence in its incautious application. And the same argument applies to other features of the neoliberal program. It's quite possible that lower tax rates spur growth and innovation when tax rates are cut from 70% highs, but also that a program of permanent upper bracket tax cutting, as practiced by America's Republican Party, won't produce the hoped-for spillover effects among the bottom 95%. It's possible that the initial economic insight that some corporate consolidation could be good for consumers was useful for antitrust decision-making in the 1970s and 80s, but needs to be corrected as monopolies regather. It's possible that a program of deficit reduction and tight money that makes sense when inflation is galloping doesn't make sense when we're closer to deflation. The countries sometimes need a loose monetary policy to fight stagnation, and having a financial overclass too fixated on the perils of a for-now imaginary inflation is a recipe for permanently lower growth. Then, alongside this brief against an overextended neoliberalism, there's a more subtle argument, pushed by the more serious sort. I think I skipped a page here. Sort of liberalism that the neoliberal program hasn't so much pushed too far as pushed in the wrong direction. In this argument, we don't need less deregulation, but a different kind than we have, because incumbents and insiders in the West have captured the sprawling regulatory state and used it to freeze out potential competition. The age of stagnation, according to this theory, is the fruit of what Brink Lindsay of the Niskenson Institute and Stephen Tellez of Johns Hopkins University describe as a captured economy, in which everything from land use rules to exclusionary zoning to occupational licensing to ever-expanding intellectual property protections to corporate subsidies and tax breaks all converge to create a system that's basically the worst of socialism and the worst of capitalism conjoined, plutocratic and sclerotic, overregulated and undertaxed, with an upper class enriching itself off rents rather than innovation, and a service class that can't advance beyond its station. The overlap between this more libertarian argument and the left-wing critique of neoliberalism is apparent in one of the texts of the post-financial crisis left, French economist Thomas Piketty's 2013 tome Capital in the 21st Century, which mined centuries worth of statistics to argue that capitalism inherently makes the rich richer because returns on capital will always be higher than simple economic growth unless some powerful force intervenes. The forces that intervened in the 20th century were the Great Depression and 2 world wars, which not only provided the impetus for massive government interventions, but destroyed outright a great deal of capitalist wealth. The book is The Decadent Society by Russ Douthat.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent based out of Kyiv, Ukraine. He is the host of the On the Edge podcast. Also, he's got a vigorous YouTube blog. Just look for Philip Ittner, Philipittner. And Ittner Philip, his last name, first name, is his handle for Blue Sky and Twitter. Phil, welcome back to the program. I see that Trump and Ukraine appear to have signed an agreement of some sort, a contract of some sort that has to do with Ukraine's mineral wealth. What's the deal here? What's going on?
Well, actually, this is a idea that were proposed initially by President Volodymyr Zelensky, a way to kind of get America to have some skin in the game, because, you know, there are these rare earth minerals that America would like to get its hands on for some advanced technologies like batteries or, you know, satellites or any number of different things. Zelensky initially proposed this, again, to get America to have some skin in the game, and then it went back and forth, and at one point, the Trump administration had put forward a proposal that was like incredibly disproportionately favorable to America in that Ukraine got very little out of the deal. What looks like has been signed, and again, we're still kind of getting the precise details of a lot of this, is that this will be a much more there'll be a lot more reciprocity. That Ukraine will get some benefit from this. They'll get some capital. America will get some capital. That'll be done with the engagement of America. And that will be much more beneficial for Ukraine. And most people that I speak to here are of the mind that, look, we have to have America invested in Ukraine so that they have a reason to help with the defense of the country. Mm-hmm. And if we have to do this, even if the deal does have some preferential aspects towards America, we're still willing to do this because we want to find a way for Washington, and in particular Trump, because of course everything is transactional with him, to be involved. And so, right, exactly. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, but Phil, just like the Budapest Memorandum, this agreement, from what I'm reading in the press, I haven't read the agreement itself, does not offer Ukraine any kind of security guarantee. So, you know, we could say, yeah, sure, we'll take your minerals, it's all good, and then, you know, we just stand back as Russia eats them alive.
Yeah, I mean, entirely possible. You're right. The agreement does not include, to our knowledge, and I think it would have come out previously had it been the case. It doesn't guarantee any security, not strictly speaking, any security guarantees. But again, the idea is to get America where if the Russians seize these mines or these, you know, the capital assets, that obviously Washington would not like that because now they are looking to get benefit. So there is still the looming idea of a ceasefire, of which this might lead and be a contributing factor in the negotiations for a larger ceasefire. And we don't know where that's going to go. So I'm not even going to speculate about what that is. And folks here are not speculating about
which raises the question about, you know, Vladimir Putin saying that on May 5th, which is what, next Monday, I think, that he wants to have a ceasefire go into effect, apparently because he's got some big celebration going on in Moscow. What's the deal here?
This is so deeply cynical.
That's what I figured.
Look, it's about May 9th. May 9th is celebrated in Russia. It is the end of the European conflict with Nazi Germany. And it is, I mean, this is when they have, when I lived in Moscow, I attended these parades on Red Square, and they are insane. It is this massive moment in their annual calendar where they celebrate, and it is a celebration of the victory of what they see as the USSR over Nazi Germany, not taking into consideration that they drove to Moscow in Studebakers.
Kind of ignoring the Allies. I get it.
Yeah. It goes beyond politics. It's religion for the Russians. And so the potential that the Ukrainians would send a drone or a missile attack, which they have the capacity to do during this religious holiday, which is the Victory Day parade, would be very bad for Vladimir Putin. And so he's not offering a truce for the benefit of Ukraine or for Russia, frankly. He is offering this truce because this is a religious holiday for them, the marking of the end of the Second World War.
Do you think
that's what that's about.
Do you think he might be afraid? I mean, Ukraine or
they've done it before. They've done it before. The Ukrainians have the capacity.
Well, I haven't finished the question, but maybe you're reading my mind. Ukraine has been striking deep inside Russia, and people who are aligned with Ukraine appear to be striking even in Moscow. I mean, they killed a general the other day. Is there a concern that the parade will be a subject of attack?
I think that's where Moscow is coming from. I think that's where the Kremlin is coming from. Certainly, the Ukrainians have the capacity. They've sent drones right into the Kremlin. I mean, there was 18 months ago, roughly, where the Ukrainians struck the Kremlin. And you mentioned the assassination of a Russian general in Moscow. So the Ukrainians have the capacity to disrupt things in the Russian capital. And would that to happen on May 9th, which again is this enormous event on Russia's kind of calendar of events, would be very, very bad for Vladimir Putin. So it's cynicism. It's not, it isn't about like, hey, let's have a moment in time where both Ukrainians and Russians who suffered so greatly in the Second World War will have this reprieve and we can all mark this. It is far less about like, let's stop the killing, and it's more about we want to have a celebration. And again, I reiterate, Russians celebrate the end of the Second World War. Ukrainians mark the end of the Second World War because it was so devastating to this country and the amount of people that were killed here. It is not celebrated. It is marked. It is mourned in a certain way. And this is another difference between the two countries. They want to have their big grand parade on Red Square with the flags and people in uniform and kind of cosplaying the Second World War, and a bomb or a drone coming in from Ukraine during that period would be, kind of spoil the mood.
Yeah. You think?
So it's cynical.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. The last time we talked, last week, you were under attack. I mean, Kyiv itself had been bombed all night. You were telling us about that in the morning. I'm wondering what the state of the war is right now. How are things going? How have things changed in the last 7 days?
Well, we haven't had any major attacks in the capital here in Kiev, but there have been, there have been a number of attacks around the country where, they have struck apartment buildings, and they continue to use drones as a method of terror. The capital itself, and I touch wood, it has, so far in the last week been relatively quiet. But, look, it's, again, I reiterate, this proposed ceasefire is not for Ukraine's benefit or even for some sort of, equilibrium in the conflict. It would be for Moscow's benefit. But bigger picture, the Russians have shown no indication that they want to have a lasting peace here. And so this is a major issue with the 100-day mark. that we look at with the Trump administration, where he has said repeatedly that he will find a way to resolve this. Well, that's not going to happen. It's not happening anytime soon, not least of which because Moscow, aside from this offer of a 3-day ceasefire for their benefit, Moscow and Putin don't want to end the war. They think that they have the wind in their sails. They're wrong, but they every year
don't care. They've grabbed a little more territory, haven't they? I mean, maybe they're not.
They've grabbed they've grabbed a kilometer here, and they've grabbed a mile there, and they're kind of eking out a slow creeping acquirement of Ukrainian soil. But they are nowhere near their strategic objectives, and that is to change the government in Kiev and to regain control of the Black Sea by taking Odessa. And neither of those things are happening anytime soon. I mean, they're losing 1,000 to 1,200 men a day. If they go for Odessa, and they have to go through to get to Odessa, and that is the strategic point where they can control the Black Sea, which is historically, imperially, what they want to do. They will have to take a town called Kherson. They'll have to take a town. There's Mariupol, Melitopol, for them to take. It will be at least 100 days campaign, 200-day campaign to take Odessa. That means they're going to lose another 250,000 men. And I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I get it. Phil, I'm sorry, I'm out of time.
Sorry, gotta go.
Yeah,
okay, we'll
great
talk
talking
next
with you.
time.
Check out Phil's podcast. It's called On the Edge, the great Philip Ittner.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And it's Ittner Philip over on Blue Sky and Twitter. We'll be right back, 18 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks for having me on. First time, long time.
Thank you.
I did a 100-day grocery price comparison in Excel, you know. So I put I looked up a bunch of items that we typically buy, and I put them into Excel. Looking at, it was at Fred Meyer, actually. And then 100 days later, which was just a few days ago, I looked at the same exact store.
Wow, so you were planning this when Trump came into office. I'm impressed, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. I really was. And
so what'd you learn?
Here are the results are 11 items decrease in pricing and 22 items increase in pricing. And the overall, it was like 3.3% increase in pricing for it was 70 items, and the total before was $290, and then it went up to $300.36.
Wow, a 3% increase in 3 months is $369. That's a 12% annual increase, isn't it?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and some of the items that went up are, some of it was like beer and wine, and some things like that went up. And like tuna fish went down, I think is one of them, and it was all over the place.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to do it like another 100 days from now, and I never did this before.
Check in with us.
Yeah, sure. That's what I found, and of course, I don't believe what Trump says, but nor do a lot of other people. But anyways,
well, he's starting. I think he's starting to get realistic. Saying, "Sorry, your kid can't have $30. She's only going to get $1, maybe $2, and they're going to cost more. So get ready." The New York Post actually made fun of that. Jeff, thanks. That's fascinating. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing it with us, and I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you. Roger in Indianapolis. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. I'm hoping you're having a good day. I want to thank you to begin with for educating me on the Trojan horse that Advantage was to Medicare. I used your information and got switched off of Medicare Advantage.
Oh, good.
I'm now traditional Medicare.
Yeah.
The problem I have is I've been on Medicare for 8 years. The most I ever had to pay for a 90-day prescription was $9. This year, I've had to pay full price for every prescription I've ever had, I will never get any coverage because the $519 copay that was inserted into the Inflationary Reduction Act has affected me to where I will never pay the copay down through the course of the year, yet I still have to pay for the coverage because if I get out of the coverage, they're going to penalize me to get back in. And the worst part is that the people on the Advantage program are not affected.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's because they have Part D rolled in. Do you have a Part D provider?
My Part D is Aetna CVS. It's through Medicare Plan G.
Huh. So, well, that's interesting. I would suggest you shop around for a better Plan D.
I've already done that with my Medicare guy, and the things that are out there really don't help that much.
Yeah.
Most of them are a little higher.
Have you tried using the Good RX kind of things?
Yeah, well, I'm using it in in-store stuff for some of it, but it goes towards my down payment. But what I'm saying is, even if I pay full price for the whole year, I still don't get anything benefit from the product because I don't make the.
Well, that's one. Roger, the system is far from perfect and needs a hell of a lot of help. Thanks for calling. Good luck. We'll be right back. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out.
They came for Ukraine in the dead of night. A sovereign land lit by freedom's light. Sirens wailed as the skies turned red. But Ukraine stood while the cowards fled. Homes were shattered, dreams set ablaze. Yet through the smoke, the blue and yellow sways. A mother clings to a photograph. Ukraine still breathes. Ukraine still lasts. Ukraine is not alone in this. Their cry for peace, the world must kiss. Democracy's not just a word. It's every voice that must be heard. From city square to bloodstained field, they hold the line, they will not yield. Their fight is ours, this truth is known. We stand with Ukraine, they're not alone.
24 minutes past the hour, welcome back. So I want to crowdsource the answer to this question. Is Trump the victim of his staff? Or is he a pathological liar? Now, let me just define terms here. This is actually a real thing. Pathological liars are people who just make stuff up, but then once they have said it, particularly if they've said it more than once, they come to believe it themselves. So they ultimately believe their own lies. So that's option number two. Or is he a cynical liar? Does he know that he's lying? Here's what brings this up. You know, he had this digitally altered photo of Kilmar Garcia's hand with the letters MS-13 digitally superimposed on the knuckles. And Trump showed this picture. And it was obviously a doctored picture. Everybody knew it was a doctored picture. And then he gets interviewed, and when he did the Time interview, Time magazine, he said it was tattooed right on his, I'm sure you saw it, it was tattooed right on his knuckles, MS-13. And Time didn't bother to correct him, which is, journalistic malpractice. But then he did this ABC interview with Terry Moran, and Trump says, it's right there on his knuckles. He had MS-13. And Moran says, there's a dispute over that. And Trump says, well, wait a minute. He had MS-13. And Moran, he on his knuckles tattooed. And Moran says, well, he had some tattoos, but let's move on. And Trump says, no, wait a minute. And Moran's like, I want it. Trump is like, Terry. He did have the letters MS-13. It says MS-13. And Moran says that was photoshopped, and Trump says that was photoshopped. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you a break of a lifetime. You're doing the interview. And then he goes through that whole thing, and then Terry says, do you want to show me? Do you want me to show the picture? And Trump says, well, I saw the picture, and Moran's, and Trump continues to argue that this is not photoshopped, and then later in the interview, Trump comes back to it again. So what's the deal here? Is this Donald Trump being lied to? Did Stephen Miller give him this picture and say it's real? Or did somebody give him the picture and say, hey, we photoshopped this picture, we're going to lie to the American people? Can you do that? And if they told him it was real, what other lies are they telling him? How are they protecting him from reality in ways that might destroy our republic or peace on earth? And if they're not lying to him, then what the hell does that mean for America? What does that tell us about Trump?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I think this is actually a really big deal. I mean, Trump is trying, we know he's been lying about 2020 forever, and he knows he's lying, and he continues with that. But this is another lie. Why? Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Ralph Nader's most recent book, Breaking Through Power. It's Easier Than We Think. This is from the first chapter. It's titled Plutocracy of Maximums, Democracy of Minimums. When I was a student at Princeton University, I learned from my anthropology studies the concentration of power in the hands of a few is common to all cultures, societies, nations, tribes, cities, towns, and villages. Even where the thirst for self-governance and democracy is strong, as was the case in New England towns before the American Revolution against King George III, wealthy Tories were there too. In central and western Massachusetts, the farmers used the term the river gods to describe the rich merchants using the Connecticut River as a possible profitable trading route. These days, most people protesting for economic justice use the term the 1% to describe the ultra-small group of people who wield enormous influence over our society today. There is something about the differences in skill, determination, lineage, avarice, and pure luck that stratifies most people from the rulers who dominate them. In the political realm, the few become dominant because they hoard wealth and are driven to exercise power over others. When a small group rules a society, the political system is considered an oligarchy. And when only money and wealth determine how a society is controlled, the political system is a plutocracy. From the standpoint of a democratic society, both oligarchy and plutocracy are inherently unjust and corrupt. Of course, there are variations in the degrees of authoritarianism and cruelty that each system exercises over the communities it relies on for workers and wealth. Scholars have resorted to using phrases like benign dictatorship or wise rules or paternalistic hierarchies to describe lighter touches by those few who impose their rule over the many. Thomas Paine simply called them tyrannies. People, families, and communities can only take so much abuse before they rise up to resist. The job of the rulers is always to find that line and provide the lowest level of pay, security, housing, consumer protection, healthcare, and political access for society so that they can extract and hoard the greatest amount of wealth, power, and immunity from justice for themselves. In many ways, the majority of Americans live in a democracy of minimums, while the privileged few enjoy a plutocracy of maximums. This small volume is not just about the ravages of power or the assaults against disadvantaged and downtrodden communities. The dominating influence of the 1% in business, politics, health, education, and society as a whole. Over the past 50 years, Americans have suffered the relentless commercialization of everyday life, their privacy and their childhoods, their parks and prisons, their public budgets and foreign policy, their schools and religious institutions, their elections and governments, and the most basic societal institutions of them all, the family. Consider all the family functions that have been outsourced to business. Eating, cleaning, childcare, counseling, therapy, entertainment, sports, lawn work, simple repairs have been increasingly commercialized, commodified, packaged, and marketed back to us as products of luxury and convenience. Even mother's breast milk has been displaced by infant formula. In a plutocracy, commercialism dominates far beyond the realm of economics and business. Everything is for sale, and money is power. But in an authentic democracy, there must be commercial-free zones where the power of human rights, citizenship, community, equality, and justice are free from the corrupting influence of money. Our elections and our governments should be such commercial-free zones. Our environment, air, and water should never fall under the control of corporations or private owners. Children should not be programmed by a huckstering economy where their vulnerable consciousness becomes the target of relentless corporate marketing and advertising. American history demonstrates that whenever commerce dominates all aspects of national life, a host of ills and atrocities have not just festered and spread, but become normal. Enslavement, land grabs, war, ethnic cleansing, serfdom, child labor, abusive working conditions, corrupt political systems, environmental contamination, and immunity from the law for the privileged few. History also shows that whenever there have been periods when enough of the country organizes and resists, we see movements of people and communities breaking through power. Progress is made, rights are won, education and literacy increase, oppression is diminished. It was in this manner that people of conscience abolished the living nightmare imposed by the laws and whips of white enslavers. The nation moved closer to promises of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness expressed in the Declaration of Independence. We won more control over our work, our food, our land, our air, and our water. Women secured the right to vote. Civil rights were elevated and enforced. Public schools, improved environments, workplace collective bargaining, and consumer protections did not spontaneously evolve. They were won by people demanding them and breaking through power. These moments of great progress are expressed in terms of new legislation, regulations, and judicial decisions that directly benefit life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The book, Breaking Through Power, by Ralph Nader. Breaking Through Power, it's easier than we think. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com.
Roll up, join the fight. We're taking on the billionaires. We're bringing back your rights. The revolution's here. We're knocking on the door. Welcome to Bernie's anti-oligarchy tour. Bernie's anti-oligarchy tour. Step right up, don't be poor. He's fighting for the people, marching shore to shore. Bernie's anti-oligarchy tour. Knocking down that green bill door. No billionaires control us anymore.
35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Speaking of Bernie's anti-oligarchy tour, Trump, for his 100th day, went to Warren, Michigan to give a speech, and only about 4,000 people showed up. And Bernie had been in Warren, Michigan 2 weeks earlier, and he had almost 10,000 people show up. So Bernie is trolling Trump over on Twitter. He's like, "Congratulations to President Trump for drawing 4,000 people last night to a rally in Warren, Michigan. Keep it up. You brought out almost half as many people as we did in the same city last month. Americans are fighting back against authoritarianism and attacks on the working class." Yes, indeed. God bless you, Bernie. He is one of the strongest and most consistent voices for American democracy and the working class of my lifetime, and I've been around for a while. So it's just an amazing man. And like I said, I've said many times, it looks like he's handing his torch to AOC, and I think that's just a marvelous thing. I think she'd make a hell of a president, too. So picking up your calls here, David in San Francisco. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Well, hey, Tom, you remember right after the stock market crashed, those 2 days where, what was it, $6 trillion was lost, And then there was the little video of Charles Schwab with a number of other billionaires standing around in the White House, and Trump is laughing with them, talking about how Charles Schwab made $2.5 billion that day. And I'm just wondering, has there been any effort to do a boycott of Charles Schwab or to yank his license?
I have not heard anything like that.
Well, it would seem to me that if that little video reflected insider trading, that because of Trump's fluctuations on the tariffs, that Schwab knew to buy low and then sell high. Yep. And if he in fact did that, if there was an investigation of his actions as well as any of the others, then that would reflect insider trading, and you would think that Schwab would lose their license not only in New York City, for example, but in each of the 50 states,
right.
Much less his reputation.
The problem here, David, is that the Securities and Exchange Commission would be doing the investigation, or the FBI, and both of those agencies have now been corrupted by Trump's cronies. We're not going to see any prosecutions at all. I would roll this into something like an impeachment resolution and then, try to have investigations. But that's not going to happen until Democrats take back the House of Representatives. So we'll see. We'll see. But I get your point. I totally get your point.
Yeah, boycott can start yesterday.
Yeah, that's true.
And when you think about the people who are clients of Schwab that may be listening at this point, did Schwab sell them out? Did they lose money that day? And did Schwab gain personally from it? Yeah. And what's even more pitiful, if the value of America dropped by $6 trillion and he made personally a measly $2.5 billion, I'm not even sure what the math is on that, but it's got to be fractions of a penny of the value of the loss. And Schwab, to be that penny wise and pound foolish, it not only reflects his inability to do financial management, but to do you get a business license under the assumption.
I get all this, David. I'm guessing, though, that Schwab's competitors, I recall something about Fidelity kicking in money for one of Trump's projects. I'm guessing his competitors are probably just as compromised, although you're right. He was mentioning specifically Charles Schwab in that Oval Office meeting. David, thanks for the call. CJ in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Hey, CJ, what's on your mind today?
Well, thank you so much for taking my call, Tom. We talked a number of times, and I appreciate it because I consider myself fiscally conservative and a social moderate. And Mateo, we had a very nice conversation, and what a nice young man that is. I assume he's young.
He is.
Anyways, I'd like to speak to you about the transparency of this administration. I encourage every American to watch the 2.5-hour press conference of his cabinet meeting yesterday, because compared to the previous administration, you were lucky to see this. The former president. And when you did, it was usually a gaffe that his administration had to wipe out. And if David, the previous caller, was so worried about inside trading, he might want to look at Nancy Pelosi and her husband's record. Then one last thing. I just want you to be aware the syndicated radio station that you're now on in Madison fired an amazingly good, I didn't agree with him, but amazingly good radio show host, a black man named Earl Ingram. And he was amazing, and it's sad to see because the distinction of at least he would be willing to have conversations like you.
Yeah. Well, CJ, I can't and I won't comment on the programming decisions of our individual stations. I would say that, I watched a good chunk of Trump's tongue bath yesterday, where he went around the room and had each one of his, just like in North Korea, each one of his cabinet officers tell him how wonderful he is. Pam Bondi said that he saved the lives of 179 million Americans. in just 100 days. I mean, it was pathetic, CJ. It was just pathetic. But thanks for the call. I appreciate it. And I actually, CJ, I do agree with you that Joe Biden did a terrible job of communicating with the American public. And that's frankly why I think Donald Trump is back in office. Bjorn in Los Angeles. Hey, Bjorn, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'm hoping you're enjoying a joyous May 1st.
Indeed. Happy May Day.
And we're remembering those who died in Haymarket Square.
Yep.
Although that's been sort of erased from our history books in school. I last called you from the picket line with our SAG-AFTRA time. And I wanted to point out something that's been helpful to me in talking to some of my more conservative family members and friends in making real what the disparity of income and wealth is in this country when we're talking about benefiting these billionaires. Because if you turned, you talk about $1 million, sounds like a lot of money, is a lot of money. If you turned $1 million into seconds, it would take 11 and a half, a little more than 11 and a half days to count $1 at a time. If you turn $1 billion into seconds, it would take you 31.7 years to count. And that, to me, makes it a graspable piece of information.
And $1 trillion becomes what?
I think of $1 billion as being a lot, but that's a long time. And $1 trillion is 31,688 years.
Yeah.
So if we're giving $2 trillion away to the people with billions, it's so nonsensical.
Yeah, well, we gave $50 trillion to the top 1% in the 44 years since Ronald Reagan became president.
Unbelievable.
$50 trillion.
And now we don't want, so now we can't have Medicaid. We can't have Meals on Wheels. We can't have Head Start. It's so absurd.
Right, because we've got to have another $4.5 trillion in tax breaks for billionaires. I'm with you, Bjorn. And thanks for the mathematical illustration. It's a good one. I've heard it before, but it
My
really
great
gets old.
pleasure. Keep up the good work, Tom. You rock.
Thank you, Bjorn. Good talking to you. David in North Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, David, what's up?
Greetings, program. Since we established the president doesn't have to have his hand on a Bible to be sworn in, can the next governor of Florida have his hand on that book, Diary of an Economic Hitman, since that seems more relevant, whether Ukraine or
there you go.
farmland or take your pick?
I think Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible because he was afraid it would burn his hand.
Very logical. Smartest thing he did all day.
Yeah.
Right. So my good, bad, the ugly is it's good that we're celebrating May Day, and I hope enough of us are remembering the Haymarket riots and other tragedies. The bad is that the Kentucky Derby Saturday is actually socialism at its worst because Kentucky gives every $1 and gets back $2.
Oh, there's massive subsidies. Yeah.
Right. I mean, not to disrespect all the hardworking makers of bourbon and everyone who works the horses, but it's still flawed, and that should be magnified. But the ugly is I hope that the Democratic candidate for governor of Florida, whether it's me or David Jolly, will announce it at the Elian Gonzalez Museum when the Cubans were so horrified that one of their own was dragged to Cuba, but now it's just fine to drag actual American citizens to God knows where without checking papers.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was during the Carter administration, and boy, did he get grief for that one.
Well, try again. Elian Gonzalez, that was 2000.
Oh, it was? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of something else altogether.
The presidency more than he already was. It's mentioned in the movie 537 with Jim DeFeedy, among other places. So this is what we have to worry about while I try to figure out how to make sure a Democrat is in the governor's mansion. Me, David Jolly, whatever.
There you go. I'm with you. Although David Jolly used to be a Republican, but we'll see. We'll see. David, thank you for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your call. And welcome back. James in High Point, North Carolina. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, John? How you doing today, Tom? Yes. Look, I was listening to that reparations kick you did about the education and the medical costs.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I agree with you 100%. But I'm going back and I'm looking at the methodology that the Republicans and the conservatives used to actually put this load on us. And I'll just
it's
choose
personal
one, and that's higher
responsibility is the
education.
phrase that they use.
Yes, that's the phrase that they use, but that's not the reason they did it. It started back when Nixon was president and you had all protests in the 60s. And what they found and figured out was higher educated people cannot be screwed over as easily as people that don't have a formal higher education. You know, the thing, and this is the thing they wanted to get rid of. One thing they wanted to get rid of was taxes. So if you get rid of taxes, well, you have to cut a budget. Where are you going to cut a budget? Well, what happened was they cut the budgets for higher education.
Yeah, Reagan cut the education budget 18% his first year in office.
Yes, he did. And what he said, well, you know, we're not going to pay these young whippersnappers to
He
go
called
to
them
school and
brats.
go out and
He said, I'm not going to pay for the intellectual curiosity of brats in California when he ended
But
free
actually
college at the University of California system.
that was the key that he used. But actually what the target was they wanted to start the de-education of the general population of the country. Because what they knew, the only thing that could control rich people is the government.
Yep.
And the government, we have a democracy. So how do you weaken a democracy? You weaken the democracy. One thing that you pull out is a leg of education, and that's what they did. So what happened as it went on, they still needed to have people to work at a higher level in their corporations.
No,
so later on, they...
I completely get it. James, here, this is Ronald Reagan's head of education, Bill Bennett. Here's what he
But I do know that it's true that if you wanted to reduce crime, you could, if that were your sole purpose, you could abort every black baby in this country and your crime rate would go down. That would be an impossible, ridiculous, and morally reprehensible thing to do. But your crime rate would go down.
Just abort every black baby. That was the Reagan administration's solution to education problems. That was his Secretary of Education, Bill Bennett.
That was, okay, yes, and he was totally out of his wheelhouse when he was.
And when he got called out on that, he defended it.
Well, yeah. Well, we know Reagan was fairly racist.
Yeah,
and he used the Southern strategy to.
His first speech, his first official speech running for president was in the Nebosha or whatever it's county fair, in Philadelphia, Mississippi, right down the road from where Schwimmer, Cheney, and Goodman were murdered, the three civil rights workers. And the theme of it to an all-white audience of about 15,000 people was states' rights, which we all know is just, right-wing, gibberish for, keep the black people down. James, I got to run, but, excellent point. Thank you very much. Good call. 10 minutes before the hour, we'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. They wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, their ultimate talking document does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the First, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out. Paul in Minneapolis.
How you doing, Tom? Good afternoon. Back to Ukraine really quick. What do you think victory in Ukraine looks like? And can we win that without the U.S. or NATO putting boots on the ground? Because you know how these things can escalate really quickly.
Yeah. I really don't know the answer to the question, Paul. I think that stopping everything right now and freezing it in place is a start. It gives Putin all the territory that he's taken, which is about half of Ukraine when you include Crimea. He's taken a massive amount of, he's taken the equivalent of the entire eastern seaboard, in the United States, all the way from Maine down to Florida. If you just took all those states, so, and this is the first time since World War II that any European country has taken land from any other European country, with using violence. So, we're back to what Hitler was up to. I think that all the land should go back to Ukraine. I just don't know if that's practicable or practical. And Putin and Medvedev specifically, 3 days ago was saying, if you try to take back any of these territories, you're going to be looking at a nuclear war. So, it's
interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine in Germany, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he said the land that Putin has now is in Ukraine is where like 80% of the minerals, the valuable minerals are.
That's true. The Donbass,
I don't know if that statement is accurate.
There's huge mines there, yes. And that's most people, most of your, really, like Michael McFaul, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, who look at this will point that out. They'll say that, what Russia went after he went after Crimea because it's strategically vital. That's where Russia's, deep sea Mediterranean port is.
Seaport.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then he went after the Donbass and the I forget the name of the other region because they constitute 70-80% of the rare earth minerals and a large chunk of the frackable oil and coal in Ukraine. So yeah.
So going back to Crimea really quick, that was given up 11 years ago. But I'd like to go back to President Clinton. When President Clinton talked the Ukrainians to moving the missiles out,
right, in 1994.
What did the U.S. or NATO, what did we promise Ukraine for doing that? I don't know what it was. I can't remember.
The way to track it down, Paul, is to plug into a search engine Budapest Memorandum. And if you add my name, you'll get 2 or 3 articles that I wrote about this that have all the links and references and everything else. And basically what happened was in 1994, Ukraine had the 3rd largest stash of nuclear weapons in the world and was an independent country from the old Soviet Union because the Soviet Union had basically crumbled 3 years earlier. And so the United States, England, and Russia got together with the leader of Ukraine at that time, and they negotiated over the course of most of the year, late 1993, early 1994, in Budapest, this deal where Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom said if Ukraine would give up all of their nuclear weapons and give them to Russia, Russia would provide Ukraine with enough enriched uranium to power the 7 or 8 nuclear power plants that they have in that country for the next 2 decades, and the United States and England would provide Ukraine with, I think it was $5 billion, I'd have to go back and look, but a certain amount of money to help facilitate the dismantling of these weapons and the transportation of them into Russia. And then finally, all 3 of these countries, Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom, promise that Ukraine's borders would remain sovereign and would not be challenged. That was signed in 1994. Bill Clinton signed it. And that was the main thing that was violated in 2014 on Obama's watch, when Russia invaded Crimea, basically, and seized it from Ukraine. And it's just we broke an agreement. It was not a treaty. It was never ratified by the Senate, but it was an agreement.
So there's really no. I don't want to swear, but there's really no way where Ukraine's ever going to get Crimea back.
I suspect not, but if Putin were to die and a less hardline leader were to come into Russia, or if Putin were to be deposed, and a more rational person, and Russia was to swing back toward democracy, they may very well give Crimea back and go back to the deal that they had with Ukraine, which is let us continue to lease this seaport right off the coast of Sevastopol, as I recall. My daughter studied Russian there back in the day, back in the 80s. They just go back to leasing that land, but we'll just have to wait and see how it all shakes out. Paul, thanks for the call. We're hitting the top of the hour. We'll be back on the other side of the break. The new mideast project is latest Trump's foreign investment. I'll tell you about that. This is wild. How corrupt is this man?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his chapter on voter suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in American politics right now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000, in which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general, and of strict ones in particular, accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting or restrictions on registration or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently invoke the GOP's use of these tactics, often justifiably, to raise money and to galvanize turnout. This narrative contains some important truths. Some of the forms that these restrictions on voting access have taken in recent years are diabolically obvious in their efforts to keep constituencies supportive of Democrats from voting. Still others boast the distinction of being more insidiously designed and thus less obvious in their intentions. The book is An Uncivil War by Greg Sargent of The Washington Post.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. Donald Trump's corruption just never ends. You'll recall every president before Trump put their assets in a blind trust. George Herbert Walker Bush, I don't recall if it was before or after his presidency that he was president of the Carlyle Group, but during his presidency, all of his business interests, and there are many. I mean, the Bush family was a dynasty. They were worth a hell of a lot of money. And he put his assets in a blind trust. Ronald Reagan put his assets in a blind trust. Jimmy Carter, he had his only asset was his peanut farm down in Georgia, and he put it in a blind trust and hired a guy to run it, and the guy almost destroyed it. He lost. He had to sell a bunch of his property just to keep the farm, just so that they could serve as president. I mean, you could argue that George Washington didn't put his property in a blind trust, but he certainly, handed responsibility for it off to somebody else, for Mount Vernon. I mean, this is a long tradition. And there's this thing in the Constitution called the Emoluments Clause that says that no president may take any gift or thing of value from any foreign power, any foreign prince or principality. And yet that's exactly what Trump is doing. His son-in-law taking $2 billion from the Saudis. Trump himself, with his Live Golf Tour, taking millions from the Saudis. And now he's got this, $1 billion project in Qatar, and he's heading over there in 2 weeks to visit Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Normally you go to the Middle East, you visit Egypt, and the traditional power brokers, but these are the financial brokers. This is where the money is. And this is where Trump is building a new property. In Oman, the Trump family has partnered with the Dar Global Hotel and Golf Project that is being built on state-owned land. In Serbia, the Trump family is planning a new hotel in collaboration with Jared Kushner. I mean, this is wild stuff. How do you not call this just raw, naked, illegal corruption? I mean, you can't. There's no way to avoid it, except that the enforcement of the Constitution falls to either the Justice Department, which, with Pam Bondi is completely captured by Donald Trump, by a Trump loyalist, by a Trump brown-noser, or Congress, which right now is in the hands of Republicans, straight on through. So, will there ever be, I don't think so. I'm seeing press reports that Donald Trump's wealth has doubled since he became president in 100 days. Not much talk about it in the media. These are kind of stories that appear on page 18 or page 26, but serious stuff. Meanwhile, this is just wild. Betsy Fago is a longtime Republican donor. She has a mansion in Jupiter, Florida, and she was the person who hosted this big party where they passed around the stolen diary of Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley. And then that diary made its way to the media, and it was like this, look at this, how corrupt the Biden family is. And there were, basically it was just, let's trash talk Joe's daughter because she's Joe's daughter. And, it really hurt the Biden family. And there was nothing illegal was uncovered or anything like that, nothing even unethical, but just embarrassing. So this woman was responsible for this. This is, she was in charge of this. And so her son, Paul Walzak, who is a healthcare executive, he was convicted of tax evasion for siphoning for basically stealing $10.9 million in payroll taxes from the paychecks of doctors and nurses who worked for him. So, I have this little business, which is this show, and, we pay Sean and Nate and Mateo and all our folks here, Jeremy. And when we pay them, we withhold the Social Security payments and, taxes. Well, he was withholding them and putting them in his pocket for his doctors and nurses, $10 million. And so he got sentenced to 18 months in prison for this. which is fairly normal sentence for that kind of thing. And he was given 90 days to turn himself in. This was just a couple of weeks ago. And only 12 of those days elapsed before his mom apparently reached out to Donald Trump. Hey, remember when I embarrassed Joe Biden for you? I mean, nobody knows exactly what happened, but Trump just pardoned this young man. I'm guessing he's in his 40s or 50s, but this business tycoon. He got he's the son of a wealthy socialite. He himself is a business tycoon. And there you go. If you're rich and you're friends with Trump, you don't go to jail. It's that simple, even though he'd been sentenced to prison. Now, this just happened last week. Are you seeing any reporting about it in the media? I mean, this story, where did this story come from? This was over at crooksandliars.com. I mean, not exactly the mainstream media. Jeff Tiedrich's news website, in fact. So, what's going to happen with this? Nothing. Trump is apparently selling pardons, or at least giving them out as gifts to his friends. This is what dictators do. The important point here is that all of these violations of the norms of democracy, not just American democracy, democracy anywhere in the world, where you have an independent judiciary, you have an independent prosecutorial branch, Congress or the Parliament provides oversight of the president or the prime minister. And the president or the prime minister are held to high moral and ethical standards. Violating all of those norms is what dictators do. It's how you know you live in a dictatorship, is that dear leader gets regular tongue baths from his staff telling him how wonderful he is in public. He has these public displays of military prowess. Trump now wants to have missiles and tanks be paraded down Constitution Avenue or Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington D.C. This next month. The dictators routinely lie to their people because nobody's willing to challenge them because hey, it's a dictator. He can do things to you if you challenge him. And we're right on that knife's edge right now, where Trump is getting away with lies, he's getting away with corruption, he's getting away with violating the law, he's getting away with ignoring the Supreme Court's order that Kilmar Garcia has to be brought home. He's getting away with ignoring due process. All of these things that Trump is getting away with are just screaming, flares in the sky, signs that he views himself as a dictator. And as a dictator, if America has a dictator running the country, we don't have a democracy anymore. This is where we are. It's the reason why probably millions of people are in the streets right now, and more to come as the day goes on. We're just, 45 minutes away from noon here on the West Coast, so the protests will just be beginning when I get off the air here. But, we need to just acknowledge this, that as far as I can tell, we now live in a dictatorship. It's not a complete dictatorship. It's not Nazi Germany. It's not even Russia yet. We're moving very quickly in the Viktor Orban direction, try to shut down the press, suing the press. These are things dictators do. Trump is working from a playbook that is no secret. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote the playbook back in, the 1600s, 1500s? The Prince, famous book, his advice to the prince on how to control people. It's how to be a dictator. And that's what Trump is doing. And when are we going to acknowledge this? When are we going to look around and say, holy crap, this is what dictatorships look like? And we've got to do something about this. And when is the Republican Party going to stop enabling this? I mean, this is just so criminal and so corrupt. The Republicans. What the hell is going on with you? What say you? I'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
16 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us. And welcome back. Owen in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Owen, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
So far, so good. What's up?
Well, I saw something last week that I've never anywhere else is talking about it, but one of your programs last Friday on the show that This Week in White Supremacy, they had a clip where Trump said to the universe that he has done more than Christianity than anybody, even Jesus.
I saw that, yeah.
They asked about Muslims. He said, yep, all the world's religions have profited by what I have done for them.
Yeah. He's nuts. Which goes back to my question, that I started the second hour with, which is he a pathological liar? Is he being lied to? Is he merely corrupt? Is he gleefully lying? I mean, what's going on here? It might be all of the above. I don't know. But, Owen, you point out a very troubling situation, and I appreciate your calling and making that point. Thank you. Clay in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Hey, Clay, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I'm sorry to call again today. I called yesterday, but I wanted to quickly point out about, and this is what you're just now talking about, that the picture of the hand of Garcia with the MS-13, the MS-13 was obviously put on there to be an indicator of what someone claims the guy's actual tattoos mean. Now, there are two questions or two possible answers to this question or this issue, but does Trump not realize that those letters superimposed on the photograph are not part of the photograph, or does he know that, and is he just believing that somebody told him that that's what the tattoos mean? It's hard to discern that from the way he's been talking about it. It seems like he thinks that the MS-13 letters are actually on the guy's hand.
Well, that's what he asserted to Terry Moran at ABC and to the reporters at Time Magazine.
That's what it seemed like, yeah.
No, it doesn't seem like he did it.
If he can't see that those are superimposed on the photograph, that's pretty crazy.
Right,
Anybody
which raises the question,
that.
is the President of the United States that gullible or that stupid, number one? I mean, who tattoos MS-13 on their knuckles? And number two, is he being lied to by somebody, to take advantage of his gullibility or stupidity, or is he lying to us?
When you look at the photograph, you can easily see that the MS-13 letters are not on the guy's hand.
Yeah, they don't wrap around his knuckles the way a real letter would.
Yeah, it's just typed on. It was just printed on the photograph or whatever. So it looks like to me that somebody was trying to say, okay, this tattoo means M, this tattoo means S, this one
except
means one.
Except that when you look at the tattoos that they're trying to identify, there's no possible correlation to those things.
Yeah, that's right. It's just all BS. But that's just a crazy. I mean, if that's what he's looking at and thinking that's part of the photo, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, mine too.
So who knows what he really thinks?
I think it's a big deal. I think that the media should be talking about this. I think this is something that the American media needs to be paying attention to. Clay, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV down there in Mississippi. 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. It's no coincidence that the time in Europe when the church ran the continent, from around the 5th century to around the 15th or 16th century, that 1,000-year period is referred to as the Dark Ages. This is what happens when religion controls politics, when religion controls the state, the nation. And every nation of Europe was controlled essentially by the Catholic Church during that period of time. It got busted up with the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. This was what the founders of this country very much knew about. George Washington refused to declare himself a Christian. Thomas Paine wrote an entire book embracing atheism. Ben Franklin fled Massachusetts as a teenager to escape the religious threats. And Thomas Jefferson went off on it regularly. There's a whole piece about how the Republicans are trying to impose a new dark age on America. It's all laid out, all the quotes and all the links over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Oh, Canada, you packed your snow and pride. Said no thanks, Donald, we won't let you inside. We used to share maple and trust across the line. Now you're eyeing us like Alaska in '59. Mark Carney stepped up with a banker. No trade deal, fascists, we won't let you win. He warned the crowd with a voice so clear. America wants our forests, our water, our beer. Whoa, Canada, our friends so true. We used to play fair, now we're ghosting you. You sent us syrup, we sent you smog, but Trump came along, fed you to the fog. Now you're locking your borders and shutting your gate. Guess being neighbors ain't the same when your buddy's full of hate in your...
Welcome back, 23 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Mark in Wayne County, Michigan. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi there. I'm good to talk to you. A long-time listener, too, since the early days there back in Air America.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Dave yesterday kind of got my stander up with his attacking or trying to compare, I guess, Trump to Roosevelt. And why don't we talk about Roosevelt? And, Dave apparently doesn't remember the history of those days. And it was a different America. And, yeah, we were a racist country. There's no doubt about it. Most of the world was, too.
Yep.
But we certainly weren't enlightened. But the fact of the matter is the Japanese fleet attacked Pearl Harbor and destroyed our entire, nearly our entire Pacific Fleet.
Yeah.
And then, at the time, the people in the West Coast were really hysterical. And, California was pretty conservative in those days.
Yeah.
But they honestly thought that fleet was going to continue right on and attack California.
Well, Japan was also sending those balloon firebombs. We had them hit Oregon and Washington State.
Yeah, they covered that up pretty much.
Yep.
The media didn't cover the fact that there were people dying,
No,
but,
it did get covered up, but it was well known to the administration,
Yeah.
To FDR.
Of course, the point is that Roosevelt went to Congress and there was a declaration of war at that time. So when he used maybe abused the War Powers Act, he did it legally. Mm-hmm. And it was terribly an unenlightened thing and a poor thing to do. But right now, we are not at war. The only war going on is between Trump's ears. And yet he's trying to invoke that same War Powers Act. And it's just absurd to do any kind of comparison.
Well, he just had a federal judge tell him he can't do it.
The 40s.
A federal judge just, yesterday said, you may not use the Alien Enemies Act because we are not at war. And these people who are trying to immigrate into the United States for largely economic reasons or to flee persecution, these people are not soldiers. They're not invaders. No. And you can't characterize them as such. In fact, that lawyer went back, or the judge went back to the period of time from the late 1790s through the mid-1800s, because this law was put into place in 1798, and said he looked at all the old dictionary definitions of the words, for invasion and I forget the word that they used to describe troops, people, the invaders themselves. and said, you know, clearly the meaning of this law was not immigrants. And, you know, there's no evidence that we're at war with Venezuela or that Maduro has sent any of these people. So, you know, whether, you know, now we're going to wait and see if Trump is going to ignore this. And of course, he's going to appeal it. It's going to, and it's you know, eventually all this stuff is going to end up with the Supreme Court. And God only knows what's going to happen there, because he's already in defiance of the Supreme Court right now on the Garcia case.
Well, our country is fortunately in a much more enlightened time than back in the 40s. However, with Trump having come in, we're taking a huge step back in our enlightenment. That's for sure. I mean, it's very sad to see that happen, but it's funny to have somebody pointing towards Roosevelt when Trump is trying to take us back to a time.
Yeah,
when
no,
we were so unenlightened.
I get it. The hypocrisy or selective attention, or whatever you want to call it, was not lost on me, or I suspect anybody else. Mark, great to hear from you. Thanks for listening to us there in Wayne County. Louise and I took a course at Wayne State University back when we were young. Wild Edible Plants
college,
class, actually. Yeah, it's a great college.
My father went there.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. Mark, we lived in Detroit at the time. Mark, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
27 minutes past the hour. It's your media support group for We the People. Right back with your calls on the other side of the break. We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon: War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon. But why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea might play out, the adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, obtained terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appeared in the headlines every week. Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him, in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have two openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his Attorney General, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, drag her through the mud. And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon two openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
It starts with a promise, a populist glow of how to shake the system, make the status quo go. But behind the curtain, the stage is set for a power play we won't soon forget. They charm the crowd, they seize the mic, then target the truth and dim the light. The pillars quake, the ground runs red, a democracy hangs by a thread.
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Hey, where's Chad? He was going to be up next. Oh, well. Pat in Camarillo, California. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, it's actually Camarillo.
Camarillo, thank you.
Camarillo. I'm trying to figure out this term degrowth, and I couldn't seem to find anything in your work. And my understanding is that ecological economists use it as a process to stop the rampant consumption that we've got. But, I don't want to confuse it with recession, and we're definitely into degrowth by the terms that the recent publication of, negative 0.3
Right.
GP, I don't know.
First quarter, yeah.
But I
GDP.
wanted to get your take on that because I don't really get it very easily.
Well, first off, part of the reason why first quarter GDP is down is because we had a surge in imports. And that surge in imports appears to be companies advance buying large quantities of stuff to try to get out ahead of Trump's tariffs. And that surge of imports tipped the balance, so our import imbalance became greater, and that's actually subtracted from GDP. So had there not been that surge of imports, there probably would have been some growth of GDP in the first quarter. It just wouldn't have been, like the rest of the world is seeing, frankly. But in terms of degrowth, it's not a word I'm real familiar with, Pat. I'm sorry, I can't give you any kind of insights or expert knowledge here. This is a new one for me.
Okay, I guess the search continues. I mean, my understanding is that it's a process that if you have strong social systems in place, degrowth is not something to be feared. It's the emphasis is more put on how well we live.
Could be.
And
I mean, it sounds like it might have come out of the debates, in Japan and South Korea over, how do you deal with the fact that your population is shrinking and aging. China now is facing this too. I don't know though. Like I said, this is a new term for me, Pat. So I just can't speak to it. Pat, thank you for the call.
I appreciate it.
Nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
Yep. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's on your mind today? Lori in Ocala? I'm going to put Lori on hold. She's been on hold here for quite a while. So, Mateo, if you want to check out line 3. Ramon in Arlington, Texas. Hey, Ramon, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was listening to you talk about the presidents, how they gave up their, stuff to trust.
Yeah.
And then how Trump is not doing that.
Right. He's exploiting he's monetizing his presidency. Yeah.
Yeah. So and you called it, that's like a dictatorship. And in my opinion, we are in a dictatorship right now. We really don't have a president. And you even said it's a thin line. But the fact is, we're here. We're in a dictatorship.
Yeah.
And the reason people don't see it or are not awake is because, if you talk to your neighbor, he'll say, hey, don't worry about it. Don't be scared. It's not affecting you.
Yeah, well, also, he hasn't started using violence against U.S. citizens, by and large. I mean, there are a few examples, but we're not seeing the stormtroopers marching down the street and the tanks rolling into the city center, and therefore
we don't need to see that. We don't need to see that. We are in a dictatorship.
Yeah, Americans have a very weird notion of what it's going to be like, Yeah.
The sooner we wake up to say that we're in a dictatorship, the sooner we'll start acting more on what has to happen to get out of it. Because
I agree.
Once you're in it like that, it's going to be very hard to even try to adjust to it in your life, in anybody's life.
Yep.
But I just want to bring that up, that when you said that, it just kind of hit me like, wow, we're there.
Yeah. I think we are, Ramon.
Sure. Yeah.
Ramon, thanks for the call. Spot on. Carol in Valencia, California. Hey, Carol, what's up?
Hey, I'm down at the protest corner, and we've got good turnout.
Oh, great.
A couple of weeks ago, the first one, we had 2,000 people here, Tom, in Santa Clarita, the Orange County of Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
So we've got good turnout, and we've got good momentum and good energy.
Are the numbers the same or larger or smaller than 2 weeks ago?
No, it's just a few hundred that I've been doing a count. It was so far, but we have another one tonight at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they decided to have two. I think it was to try to get people who work
Right. Sure.
come out on- in
Well,
the
and it's also
evening,
only
so-
11:40 in the morning here on the East Coast, or on the West Coast, rather.
Yeah.
So marches that are probably mature now on the East Coast are just beginning on the West Coast. So, Carol, thank you. Any particular signs you want to shout out?
Oh, let me see. There's a great one that says it's Humpty Dumpty Trumpy falling off with his broken egg. Price of eggs be damned.
Right.
No king. I like that one.
Yeah.
Mine says, what does mine say? The rule of law applies to all.
There you go. Well done, Carol. Carol, thanks for the report.
Thank you. Good talking to you, Tom. Take
Thank you,
care.
Carol. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. Bruce in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind today? Bruce?
The question I wanted to ask a few minutes ago, you mentioned something about Joe Biden's daughter's diary.
Yeah. Ashley, yeah.
Yeah, Ashley Biden. I didn't even know you had a daughter. Anyway, I need more detail on that. I'm sitting on this side of the TV going, what? How did somebody get hold of her diary and then release that information?
Somebody stole her diary, and apparently a friend of hers, and stole it and sold it. And this wealthy socialite ended up with the diary and she threw this big party for right-wingers, and they passed the diary around, and it eventually ended up it eventually ended up in the hands of one of the right-wing media sources. And there were things in it that were not nothing criminal, but they were embarrassing. Ashley talking about conflicts she had with her parents, or Ashley talking about her boyfriend or whatever. And all that stuff got
diary stuff.
Yeah, and that stuff got published, and it was just a horrible thing. And that was the mom who threw that party and had Ashley's diary. She's the mother of the multimillionaire who had stolen or embezzled, or whatever the proper word is, $10.9 million from his employees that was supposed to be paid as taxes, and got nailed for it. Was supposed to go to jail for 18 months, and Trump just pardoned him, so he's not going to see the inside of a jail even once. So that's the story, Bruce.
That's bizarre. It's like,
yeah.
Who? Oh, some of her best friends are Republicans. Is it some Republican?
I don't know. Frankly, I don't recall all the details. This was early on.
It's the detail I was looking for. You know?
Well, it's fairly easy to Google. You can just plug it into a search engine and it'll pop up. Bruce, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Joe in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Not much, Tom. How are you? I don't know if you caught the Supreme Court case yesterday involving them wanting to let our charter schools, which are public schools, start having charter schools that, have that creationism. They're Catholic.
Right.
And that Supreme Court case was yesterday. And
the arguments were yesterday. And it looks like the court. It looks like the conservatives on the court are going to go along with taxpayer-funded religious education.
Yeah, the one good news thing is that Coney Barrett, the Handmaid's Tale queen, actually recused herself. So it could end up, hopefully, in a 4-4 tie, and then it would revert back to what the Supreme Court of Oklahoma said, which is, that's not constitutional.
Oh, interesting. She grew up in a Catholic cult, and she literally was called a handmaid. That was her title as a child.
Yeah, absolutely, right out of the movie and the series. I was going to say the one thing that we have to always do with these people is to quit underplaying what it is they are doing. People were calling, Musk's crew of data hackers, kids and teenagers and stuff. These were one of them had written like 3 books on AI. One of them actually ran a test pilot app, which was a signature verification AI, which was going to look at voter signatures. So, these are very dangerous people. And, I said, they're stealing all the data.
Yeah.
They're creating these massive portfolios. I think they have enough backdoors in the system now to basically hold the United States hostage. But the reason I called today was...
I think, if I can just interject here, Joe, I think that what Trump wants to be able to do and what Musk wants to be able to do is say, oh, this person, just irritated me on X. I didn't like what they said. So let me just push a button and instantly I've got their college records, I've got their police records, I've got their IRS records. I know every product that they've ever purchased. I've got everything that they've ever put on a credit card. Somewhere in this pile of stuff on this guy's name is something that at the very least is embarrassing and perhaps even criminal, and we're going to nail this sucker. That's what he wants.
Yeah. It's really a data aggregation across all the systems, all the platforms. And I really do think they're already using that to target some people like Latricia James in New York. But the reason I called was, we talked a long time ago about all the Republicans who keep calling wanting to send missiles into Mexico to go after the gangs there. And of course, now we're calling them terrorists officially. And we know what that means under every president since Bush. They can just attack, get no permission. But, on that border area, they've actually got M1126 personal carrier units there. These are heavy armored vehicles. Right? And they said, oh, well, don't worry about it because they're not armed. We've taken all the armament out. But, they can put those armaments in them so quickly. And is it more of an invasion staging unit? Is Mexico?
I don't know. I mean, militarizing that entire border is a wild, huge step. And whether it's the first step to an invasion of Mexico, I don't know. If I was Mexico, I'd be very concerned. Joe, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
47 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Lori in Ocala, Florida. Hey, Lori, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Happy May Day.
Thank you. Back at you.
Thank you. I've been thinking, as I want to do, and I always try to think of, okay, well, how can we solve this? And you're really good. You always say, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? And now I have a whole new message because I stumped myself. I think you personally, Tom, are one of the best communicators in the business. You break it down. You always let us know this is what happened, this is how it happened, etc. Well, right now, DT says the world has stolen our wealth, and we have to get that back. And he is using tariffs to right the wrong. DT is telling a story, but he has the bully pulpit. Now, the U.S. is the richest country in the world. The U.S. dollar is so reliable, so strong, it's the international standard. We have the best schools in the world. Social Security is one of the strongest forms of retirement. We have the best post office. I can go on and on. And who is taking this away from us? The billionaires. And who is giving it to the billionaires? Our elected representatives. And now they're so afraid to have town meetings because they can't confront or they can't be confronted by the people that they're supposedly representing with the truth. And so they've given that back up. So what do? How do we get a platform for a day or two and just have maybe senators, congresspeople, maybe some celebrities into a large venue and ask questions? Well, how did we get this rich and where did that money go? So that people can see this was stolen from inside. Nobody stole our money, and tariffs are another way of stealing more money from us. What do you think?
I'm with you, and we need to start having the press try to answer the question: what happened to the $50 trillion that was taken out of the homes and accounts and assets of the bottom 95% and given to the top 1%? In the 44 years since Reagan started cutting taxes and subsidizing billionaires. Inquiring minds want to know. Lori, thank you. That was brilliant. Paul in Zillow, Washington. Hey, Paul, you're at a protest? Hey, Paul. You're on the air.
Hi there.
Hey.
As you hear, standing on a busy street corner.
Uh-huh. So how's it going?
And we're in Zilla, a pretty red district of a pretty red area, and we're getting lots of thumbs up, lots of waves, lots of honks.
Cool.
I have yet to see a thumbs down, and I haven't seen a middle finger. So that's the report today from Zilla.
Okay, what are your favorite signs?
I've got one up. My best sign ever, honk for the Constitution.
Yeah.
I've got a woman smiling and waving who's holding one that says due process.
Yep.
And mine says Medicare, not millionaires.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. So how many people are there?
Just two of us.
Just two of you?
I was hoping.
Cool.
Yep. But, like I said,
That's
we're
how it
making an
starts.
impact. People are responding.
Well, and it's not even noon yet, so, there's still a whole day or half a day ahead of you, Paul. So,
Well, we're here 11 to 1, and then there's other demonstrations in the area that will bring other people out.
There you go. Okay, Paul, thanks for the report from Zillow, Washington. Great to hear from you. I appreciate it. It's 52 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. The MAGA Republicans have a plan for America. It involves something called fascism. It's a three-step plan, actually, to take over America and turn us into a fascist state. They're following the example of Vladimir Putin in Russia and Viktor Orban in Hungary. Viktor Orban, who is held up by conservatives as the example of how a country should be run. He came to Texas to give a speech to CPAC and got a standing ovation. So the three steps. Number one, take over the electoral systems and basically rig them, along with massive gerrymandering. Number two, build a fascist base by mobilizing hate against minorities, gender minorities, racial minorities, religious minorities, while merging with one of the large factions of a church. And the billionaires in the country. And number three, seize control of state power and turn the criminal justice system against your enemies. There's an op-ed about the whole thing over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, Revealed, the MAGA Republicans' Three-Step Plan for Classic Fascism. Check it out.
On the steps of a capital, blood was spilled, a reckoning of rage, a nation's will. The promises whispered on a treacherous wind, I'll free them all, said the man who sinned. Day one he vows their cages will fall, heroes he claims in their violent thrall. While justice weeps for the lives they've torn, he raises the banner of a new storm born. A call to arms, the thunder roars, he pardons the guilty, opens the doors. A shadow looms, a nation divided, the fire of hatred is reignited.
Welcome back, 54 minutes past the hour. Mel in Catonsville, Maryland. Hey, Mel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, hi, Tom. I was thinking, everybody's getting caught up with Trump and his chaos that he causes each and every day, what he's doing right now, and certainly that should be addressed constantly. But it might be good to just step back a little bit and just remember who this guy is as a person. Here's somebody who combat veterans who died in combat, heroes, call them suckers and losers. He mocked a disabled person, a reporter, publicly. And no apologies, never. He bragged, if you remember, about sexually assaulting women, that he somehow has the right, whenever he wants to grab women by the pussy and brag about it. He praised in a deadly demonstration in Charlottesville, Virginia, where a woman died, that neo-Nazis were good people. So you're looking at somebody here who has no moral compass. He has
he cheated on all three of his wives.
Yeah, cheated on every one of his wives. Buried the first one, didn't he? In his golf course for a tax credit. I mean, my God. So you're dealing with a person who's really of a low quality as an individual. And then you might say, well, all right, I heard one of your prior callers saying America used to be a racist country. I would submit respectfully that it still is.
Oh, yeah.
And people who voted for him, it shouldn't be a surprise that they reelected him because he represents, unfortunately, a very, very bad demographic in this country. So you might say to yourself, well, what can we do about it? What can we do about it? I would suggest, one person, each of us can make a difference. We know this with protesting that's going on. And I applaud your prior caller for being in a protest. My wife and I have done that repeatedly. But you isolate these people. They're not good people.
Yeah. Mel, I'm sorry I'm out of time, but I get it, and I agree. Thank you so much for the call, and thanks for listening to us on SiriusXM. Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag you're it. Have a wonderful protest today if you show up. Tell us your stories tomorrow. And be good. Stay safe. I'll catch up with you tomorrow on the other side.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say, fight back!